Hey guys, tonight we're plunging headfirst into a swirling, god-sneezing chaos dimension. Because that's how all great stories begin, right? You're about to explore one of the oldest and most intricate mythologies on Earth, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. No offense. The gods are moody, the rivers are alive, and even the air has feelings. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I don't want to be that guy. Also, drop your city and what time it is right now in the comments. I always love seeing how weirdly global this sleep cult is becoming. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It all starts in complete darkness. No stars, no sun, no land, no sky. Just the infinite primordial waters known as none. You're not floating in them. You are them. They are still, silent, endless, and absurdly dramatic. There's no time or space here, no motion or purpose. It's like pre-coffee Monday morning stretched across eternity. And from these waters, out of nowhere, or maybe out of everywhere, rises Atum. Atum is the first god, not born or made, just suddenly there. Like that dream where you're already falling but don't remember climbing anything first. He's got no parents, no home, no pants, just pure divine energy, manifesting himself by sheer will. Alone in the dark, Atum feels this overwhelming urge to create, but with no one else around, there are limited options. So what does he do? He sneezes. Yup, that's the Big Bang ancient Egyptian edition. He sneezes out two children, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. Some versions say he spit them out, others say he used alternative biological methods. Either way, you now have two new beings flying into the void, sneezed into life by the universe's first solo parent, and somehow, this absurdly relatable chaos becomes divine order. Shu and Tefnut tumble through the nothing, spreading air and humidity wherever they go. This is the birth of contrast, dry and wet, breath and vapour, space and resistance. The world is beginning to differentiate itself piece by piece with Atum watching proudly. But then, Shu and Tefnut don't come back. They vanish. And for the first time, Atum panics. It's a strange and human moment from a god who shouldn't even know what worry is. So he tears out his own eye, yes, literally, and sends it through the darkness to find them. This eye is not just a regular eye, it's the Eye. A conscious, magical, flaming beacon that eventually finds the children and brings them back to Daddy Atum. Reunited, Atum sheds a tear of joy, and when that tear hits the floor, which is still technically not a floor but swirling metaphysical jelly, humans are born. You're welcome. And suddenly emotion enters the divine. It's not just cosmic physics anymore, it's messy and heartfelt and deeply symbolic. You've got the first family reunion, the first missing persons case, and the first mythological eye with abandonment issues. As Shu and Tefnut settle back in, the next stage of creation begins. Together they give birth to Geb and Nut, earth and sky. Unlike their parents, who are kind of abstract, Geb and Nut are more physical. Geb is the solid land beneath your feet, even if those feet don't exist yet. Nut is the arching sky above, and they are very into each other, like clingy high school couple into each other, so much so that they won't stop cuddling. They lie wrapped in an eternal embrace, with Nut lying on top of Geb, refusing to part. Unfortunately, this causes a cosmic traffic jam. Nothing else can grow. There's no space for life, no air for breath. It's a divine codependency that's literally suffocating the universe. So Atum, in a slightly less chill mood, orders Shu, their dad and the god of air, to physically pry them apart. With great effort, Shu pushes Nut upward, forming the sky, and presses Geb downward, solidifying the land. He plants himself forever between them, arms stretched to hold them apart, and just like that the world has structure. Earth below, sky above, and air in between. And Nut, though separated, still finds ways to reach Geb. Every night she swallows the sun and gives birth to it again in the morning, stretching over the earth like a mother cradling the horizon. It's oddly poetic, and a little uncomfortable if you think too hard about the logistics. Here's your first big historical fact. These creation myths were already ancient when the pyramids were new. The pyramid texts, some of the oldest religious writings on record, contain versions of this entire cosmic family drama etched into stone walls, like an eternal divine soap opera for dead kings. And here's your first quirky, under-the-radar fact. The Egyptians sometimes believed Atum had a twin brother, an evil twin named Apophis, the embodiment of chaos. Except, he wasn't born, he just happened. Which sounds like the ultimate sibling rivalry. I created myself out of nothing. Oh yeah, I uncreated myself harder. Now for a little scholarly headbutting. There's still debate over whether the gods were originally intended as literal beings or symbolic personifications. Was Geb really a dude with plants growing from his chest? Or just a metaphor for agriculture? Were these myths meant for priests, for peasants, or for royal propaganda? Some Egyptologists argue that the myths were coded philosophical systems, while others insist they were bedtime stories with terrifying monsters and deep moral subtext. Honestly, probably both. But for now, let's float gently in the aftermath of cosmic birth. You're drifting in a brand new world, structured but not yet populated, orderly but not yet alive with movement. The stage is set. The gods are born. The sky arches protectively above you. The ground feels steady beneath your invisible feet. And somewhere, in the space between the stars and the soil, stories are about to grow like lotus flowers. So now the world has bones. Sky above, earth below, air in between. Check, check, and check. But it still feels quiet. A little too quiet. Like that ominous pause right before the mummy's eyes pop open in a bad movie. The basic architecture of existence is in place, but where are the feelings? The colours? The drama? Don't worry, that's about to arrive on cue with two gods who are literal breath and spit, Shu and Tefnut. Now, let's zoom in on this divine couple. Shu, the god of air, isn't just a gentle breeze ruffling palm trees. He's structure, space, separation. The invisible glue that holds the universe together while also keeping everyone at arm's length. Tefnut, on the other hand, is moisture in every form, mist, dew, sweat. That slightly clammy feeling you get after a nap. Together they're not only holding the world apart, but also fusing it with life. Think of them as the atmosphere's original power couple. But even gods get curious, especially when you're literally birthed by a cosmic sneeze and raised in absolute darkness. So, at some point Shu and Tefnut venture out from Atum's divine bubble into the rest of the void. No text messages, no BRB, exploring chaos. They just disappear. And for Atum, this is personal. These are his only kids and now they're gone into the infinite nothing. Again, classic divine parenting problems. So, in desperation, he removes his one remaining eye and sends it out to search for them. Yes, again. This eyeball really earns overtime. It wanders the cosmos, searching high and low, probably judging everything it sees along the way. Eventually the eye finds Shu and Tefnut and brings them back, safe, changed, and radiant. When Atum sees them return, he weeps tears of joy, and where those tears fall, humans are born. Tiny, confused, wriggling humans. We're not the product of love or thunder or lightning bolts. Nope. We're divine saltwater tears, which, if we're being honest, makes a weird amount of sense. Now that they're back, Shu and Tefnut get down to the serious business of being generative gods. They give birth to Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky, the clingiest siblings/lovers in divine history. But let's not rush ahead. For now, let's appreciate Shu and Tefnut for what they are. The breath and moisture of life, that first warm gust across a desert dune, or the steam rising from a clay pot at dusk. These gods aren't flashy, but they're essential. No Shu, no breath, no Tefnut, no sweat, no clouds, no coffee steam. Tragedy. Here's a historical fact that adds some sparkle. In early temple carvings and pyramid texts, Shu is often shown holding up Nut, the sky goddess, with his arms spread wide while standing on Geb's chest. This isn't symbolic. This is the job. He literally holds up the heavens so we don't get squashed like divine insects. So if you ever feel underappreciated at work, remember Shu's been stuck in an eternal stretch pose for 5,000 years. And Tefnut? She didn't get as much sculptural fame, but she was just as important. Some texts portray her as a lioness goddess, fierce and glowing with golden light. That gentle mist vibe. Don't let it fool you. She had claws. In some myths she was even the Eye of Ra, which means she got to take divine vengeance into her own paws. More on that in a future nightmare. Let's detour briefly into something a little weirder. There are versions of the myth where Tefnut gets angry and just leaves. She storms off to Nubia, becomes a raging lioness, and starts destroying everything in her path. The sun dims, crops die, chaos returns, and Shu? He has to go on a journey to bring her back, using trickery, dancing, and buckets of beer. Imagine your partner leaves the house in a rage, and your game plan is, okay, I'll fix this with alcohol and interpretive dance. Ancient romance was complicated. Now for the scholarly debate of the evening. Some Egyptologists argue that Shu and Tefnut weren't originally separate beings. They may have started as a single dual-aspect concept, a kind of breath-moisture fusion that only split into characters later for the sake of narrative clarity. It's possible their separation was less about divine biology, and more about creating a usable cosmology. In other words, the gods were basically ancient TED Talks disguised as bedtime stories. Other scholars totally disagree, pointing out that even the earliest inscriptions show clear distinctions between the two. Shu had feathers and cool sunglasses, okay, maybe not the sunglasses, and Tefnut got the lion head treatment. The jury's still out. Anyway, let's return to that moment when the siblings Geb and Nut arrive on the scene. Shu and Tefnut, now officially parents, pass the baton to the next generation. Geb, who is land, is a chill, earthy guy, always lying down, sprouting plants and occasionally laughing earthquakes. Nut is the sky. Ethereal, mysterious, arched over the world with stars twinkling on her belly. They fall in love, which is adorable if you ignore the whole sibling thing, and immediately become inseparable. Literally. Atum is not pleased. He needs space between earth and sky for more stuff to happen, like weather and drama and pyramids eventually. So he tells Shu to separate them, and Shu, being ever the obedient son and eternal middleman, wedges himself between his kids and holds the position forever, like an awkward divorce mediator who becomes a ceiling fan, and that's how the world gets its shape, not through epic battles or grand explosions, but through extremely complicated family tension and the physical manifestation of emotional boundaries. Honestly, it's kind of beautiful. From a sensory point of view, you can almost feel it. The dryness of Shu brushing your skin like a desert wind, the dampness of Tefnut curling through your lungs like morning mist. The weight of Geb under your feet, solid and warm, the arch of Nut overhead, deep blue and studded with stars. You're lying right in the middle of this myth, literally between heaven and earth. It's bedtime now for the gods too. The sky is settling into night. The stars are just beginning to pulse into view, forming constellations that don't have names yet. The air is still. The moisture hangs gently, like a promise of something more. Creation is a slow burn in Egyptian myth. It doesn't explode into being. It stretches, sighs and yawns. It separates and weeps and breathes. And here, between these gods, you rest, tiny and irrelevant, born of tears, but somehow part of it all. Okay, so now we've got air, moisture, sky and land, all in place and doing their divine thing. The lighting is good, the vibes are decent, and creation is officially past the beta phase. But don't get too comfortable yet, because the story is about to take its first dramatic turn. You see, while Shu is busy playing eternal sky prop, and Tefnut is off being divine humidity, their children, Geb and Nut, have gotten themselves into a bit of cosmic trouble. Spoiler, it's very hard to create life when your kids won't stop making out in the living room. So here's the situation. Geb, the earth god, is lying flat, as one does when you're made of dirt and tectonic plates. Nut, the sky goddess, is lying directly on top of him, curled around the world like a glittery blue yoga mat. They are so tightly intertwined that literally nothing else can fit between them. No light, no time, no people, not even a stray breeze. It's romantic, sure, but also kind of stifling for everyone else in the universe. Atum takes one look at this divine cuddle puddle and goes, absolutely not. And that's when Shu, ever the family man, steps in again. Imagine being asked to break up your own kids because their relationship is stopping time. Rough gig. But Shu obeys. He shoves his arms under Nut and pushes her upward. Hard. She resists at first, stretching like rubber. Geb clings to her ankles with desperate fingers, but Shu's not playing. He forces them apart, locking himself in between like a divine doorstop. From this moment forward, the world finally breathes. Sky and earth are permanently separated. Geb becomes the landscape, mountains, valleys, deserts, and Nut forms the heavens, arching above him with stars decorating her belly and limbs. She stretches from horizon to horizon, held in place by Shu's strength. They can never touch again, not directly. And that's kind of the point. But here's the twist. Nut is pregnant. Yep. Even though the separation has just begun, Nut is already carrying the seeds of the next generation of gods, 5 of them to be exact. But the sun god Ra, who's been lurking in the background as Atum's upgraded alter ego, gets wind of this pregnancy and loses it. Apparently, there's some divine rule that says Nut isn't allowed to give birth on any day of the year, not one. Which sounds like a petty HR policy from a very controlling upper manager, but Nut's not about to let a little celestial bureaucracy stop her. She goes to Thoth, the god of wisdom, magic, and generally figuring things out. Thoth, being the cleverest nerd in the pantheon, comes up with a loophole. He gambles with the moon, wins some extra light, and uses it to create 5 bonus days outside the official Egyptian calendar year. These are the apagamenal days, unofficial, uncounted, and therefore totally loophole compliant. And on each of these secret days, Nut gives birth to a different god. Day 1, Osiris. Day 2, Horus the Elder, different from the other Horus. Trust me, we'll get there. Day 3, Set. Day 4, Isis. Day 5, Nephthys. These 5 siblings will become the heart and soul, and in some cases the shattered spleen, of Egyptian mythology. They're complex, flawed, powerful, and constantly entangled in each other's lives like a divine reality show with very high stakes. Now let's take a moment to appreciate the style of these myths. The Egyptians didn't just slap together a cosmology with a few thunderstorms and call it a day. They crafted a whole narrative ecosystem with consequences, contradictions, and emotional weight. Like, think about it. Geb and Nut, separated forever, watching their children grow up in different corners of the world, unable to embrace, whisper, or even high-five. Geb can only rumble beneath her, causing the occasional earthquake. Nut, in turn, swallows the sun every night and gives birth to it every morning, arching her back as she moves across the sky. Their love story becomes the rhythm of day and night. Here's your historical fact for this section. Nut was sometimes depicted in tomb art stretched over the sarcophagus, covered in stars, literally forming the protective ceiling of the afterlife. The deceased would lie within Geb, cradled by the earth, while Nut wrapped around them from above. Death, for the Egyptians, wasn't an end, it was a reunion, a gentle return to the original divine embrace. And now for your quirky fringe fact. In some versions of the myth, Geb is jealous, intensely jealous, of Nut's later interactions with Ra, and even with her own children. He's not just Earth, he's Earth with serious attachment issues. One myth even has him laughing so hard at something Ra says that he spits out snakes. Yes, that's right. Geb's laughter literally spawns venomous serpents. Which might explain why Egypt was constantly dodging cobras. Of course, none of this unfolds without some scholarly side-eye. There's ongoing debate among historians and Egyptologists about whether Nut and Geb's separation was purely mythological, or if it symbolised something deeper, like the Egyptian obsession with dualities, order and chaos, male and female, life and death. Some argue that Geb and Nut reflect agricultural cycles, earth and sky working in tandem to nourish crops. Others say it's more astronomical, mapping seasonal shifts and celestial events. Still others think we're reading too much into bedtime stories carved into stone walls. Honestly, they all have a point. So now the stage is truly set. The universe has vertical dimension. The sky's locked above, the earth rests below, and time is beginning to unfold in a rhythm shaped by gods, love, loopholes, and loss. Nut watches over you from above, stars winking in her limbs. Geb supports you below, solid, ancient, and slightly snake-prone. Shu stands between them, arms trembling, holding balance itself, and somewhere inside Nut's divine womb, the next era of gods is stirring. Sleepy, confused, and destined for either greatness or a messy family feud. Probably both. You shift under the cosmic ceiling, the sky pressing gently against your dreams, the earth steady beneath your bones. The wind whispers between the two like a lullaby. And in that space, small, sacred, suspended, you wait for the first real stories to begin. Now that Nut has managed to sidestep divine HR and pop out 5 mythological heavyweights, things are about to get complicated. Like, ancient dynasty meets dysfunctional group chat complicated. So far, the gods have been busy shaping the universe, splitting sky from earth, inventing atmosphere and launching the concept of days. But now, with Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys and Horus the Elder stepping into the picture, we shift from cosmic architecture to divine drama. And guess what? You're sitting front row for the most iconic family feud in Egyptian mythology. First up, Osiris. He's the oldest, the golden child, literally. Osiris comes into the world glowing with charisma, wisdom, and a natural flair for leadership. As soon as he's old enough, he takes charge of the world like he's been waiting forever to get started. He becomes king of Egypt, civilizes the land, teaches people how to farm, introduces laws, and basically turns chaos into society. Under his rule, everything thrives. Crops grow taller, people stop eating each other, and for once nobody's turning into a snake. It's a golden age. He's not just respected, he's worshipped. Mortals sing songs about him. Gods nod in approval, it's all looking pretty great. And here comes Isis, Osiris' sister and wife. Yes, that's a thing here. Don't think too hard about it. Isis is brilliant, fiercely protective, and absolutely not to be underestimated. She knows magic, like high-level, bend-the-laws-of-reality magic, and she's beautiful too, not in a goddess on a pedestal way, but in a you'd-follow-her-into-the-underworld kind of way. She and Osiris rule together, not just as king and queen, but as equals, partners, strategists. Soulmates with a cosmic power couple aesthetic. Of course, whenever you have golden children shining too brightly, there's always someone lurking in the shadows, seething quietly. Enter Set, the brother, the wild card, god of storms, deserts, violence, and that look you give someone right before flipping the board game. He's not subtle. He's born red-haired, which in Egyptian myth is a massive red flag, literally and metaphorically. While Osiris is bringing order, Set embodies the raw forces of chaos, but he's not evil, not exactly, just oppositional, destructive, competitive, and deeply, deeply jealous. Set watches as Osiris is loved and adored, as Isis is respected and praised, and something inside him curdles. All that glory, that admiration, it should have been his. So he makes a decision. He's not going to wait around hoping the universe notices him. He's going to take the throne, and not in a quiet way either. Here's how it happens. Set throws a party, a very fancy one. Everyone's invited, gods, mortals, cosmic hangers-on. There's wine, music, divine finger foods, the whole 9 yards, and right in the centre of the party, Set unveils a stunning custom-made coffin. Not your average pine box either. This thing is decked out, perfectly polished, crafted to exact measurements. In fact, Set says, whoever fits perfectly in this coffin gets to keep it. You can probably see where this is going. One by one, the party guests climb in, laughing and trying it out like it's some bizarre game show. But of course, none of them fit. And then Osiris steps in. He lies down inside, and wouldn't you know it, it fits like a glove. The moment he's in, Set slams the lid shut, nails it closed, pours molten lead over the seams, and hurls the box into the Nile. Party's over. Boom! Just like that, Osiris is gone. It's the first real act of violence in Egyptian myth, and it hits hard. Not because it's brutal, though it is, but because it's personal. Set doesn't kill a monster or a rival from another pantheon. He kills his own brother, a beloved king, a bringer of the order. It's not a battle, it's betrayal. And the ripples from that one act will haunt the gods for eternity. Here's your historical fact. In real-world ancient Egypt, the myth of Osiris's death was central to funerary practices. Every deceased person wanted to become Osiris in death, to follow his path into the afterlife, be judged and reborn. That's how powerful this myth became. Millions of people identified with Osiris as a symbol of death and renewal. Now, for your fringe fact, there are fringe versions of the myth where Set doesn't just kill Osiris once. In some tellings, Set finds the coffin after it washes ashore in a tree trunk, dismembers the body into 14 pieces, and scatters them across the land. Because apparently regular murder wasn't enough. So now Osiris is both dead and scattered, and the afterlife hasn't even been invented yet. Meanwhile, Isis is not having it. She doesn't scream, she doesn't collapse, she moves. She sets out on an epic journey to find the body of Osiris, tracking down every rumour, following the Nile, disguising herself when needed, tricking other gods for information. She becomes a wanderer, a mourner, a magician on a mission, and when she finally finds the coffin, wedged in a pillar inside a distant palace, she collapses into grief. But she's not done. This brings us to the scholarly debate of the night. Is Isis the first fully realised female protagonist in mythic history? Some argue yes. She's powerful, self-driven, emotionally complex and deeply magical. Others suggest her story was shaped and reshaped by generations of male priests, reducing her to a support figure for Osiris and later, Horus. Either way, her presence looms large, and her role is active. She is not a footnote, she is the engine of resurrection. And there's something else. Isis isn't just trying to get her husband's body back for a proper burial, she's trying to bring him back, as in, alive. But that's a story for another night. For now, the coffin floats down the Nile, the gods whisper among themselves, and Set stands smugly in the shadows, convinced he's won. But this isn't the end of Osiris, it's only the beginning. You close your eyes as the river carries the coffin away, its dark silhouette vanishing between reeds. The air hangs heavy, thick with betrayal. Somewhere far off, you hear the soft rustling of wings, the hiss of magic weaving through the night. The world mourns quietly, as gods weep in secret. Sleep tight. The dead don't always stay gone. So now we're floating, quite literally, down the Nile, with the most sacred corpse in all of Egyptian mythology. Osiris is sealed inside his handcrafted murder box, drifting away under moonlight, while Set is back home basking in what he thinks is a flawless victory. And on the surface, it does look like he's won. He's eliminated the competition, taken the throne, and tossed his brother into the river like a piece of divine garbage. But there's one thing Set has grossly underestimated: how much Isis absolutely refuses to let him win. Let's rewind a bit. While the coffin carrying Osiris floats through the papyrus reeds and crocodile-infested waters, word starts to spread. Gods whisper. Birds carry rumours, humans feel something shift in the wind, even if they don't know why. Isis hears the news and drops everything. She throws on her travelling cloak, probably something dramatic and black, and sets off alone. Now picture this: a goddess, incognito, wandering through Egypt in human form, searching for her husband's body. She travels across swamps, deserts, villages. She begs, she barters, she shapeshifts when necessary. She listens to the murmurs of the river following its clues. She's not throwing lightning bolts or raising armies, she's just relentless. That kind of quiet intensity, the kind where someone's already grieving but hasn't even had time to cry, that's Isis. Eventually the coffin washes up on the shores of Byblos. Yes, that's modern-day Lebanon, because apparently divine corpses drift internationally. There, a tree grows around the box, completely encasing it. Locals come across the strange new tree and decide it's majestic enough to become a palace column. So they cut it down, coffin and all, and build it into the throne room of the king of Byblos, which, if you're counting, makes Osiris the world's first piece of haunted furniture. Isis, of course, tracks the coffin to this very palace. She befriends the queen of Byblos, again without revealing who she really is. Some versions say she takes on the role of a nursemaid, caring for the queen's child and secretly performing magic. One night, she tries to burn the mortality out of the baby by holding him in flame, a common divine babysitting technique, and apparently. The queen walks in, panics, and ruins the spell, so Isis drops the disguise, goes full goddess, and demands the tree. The king, suddenly very motivated to be helpful, surrenders the pillar. Isis splits it open and finds the coffin inside, with Osiris's body still intact. And here, in the middle of a foreign palace, with incense in the air and tears in her eyes, Isis holds her husband's lifeless form, but there's no time to mourn. She takes the coffin and flees back to Egypt, hiding it deep in the marshes of the Nile Delta. But of course, nothing stays hidden for long in mythology. Set, now ruling Egypt with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, hears whispers that Isis found the body. He goes hunting, and when he finds it, unguarded, vulnerable, lifeless. He doesn't just panic, he explodes. In an act of pure rage, he tears Osiris's body into pieces. 14 pieces to be exact, and he flings them across the land like dark flower petals. This isn't just murder, this is annihilation. He wants Osiris erased from memory, shredded beyond resurrection. But again, Set underestimates Isis. She doesn't collapse, she begins again. This time her search is even harder. She's not looking for one thing now, she's looking for scattered parts, fragments hidden in temples, rivers, swamps and mountains, and yet she persists. She sets out with her sister Nephthys, who, side note, is married to Set but secretly loves Osiris and sides with Isis. Sisterhood apparently trumps everything. Together, Isis and Nephthys scour the land. Every time they find a piece, they mourn it, clean it, anoint it, and wrap it in linen. This is the mythic origin of mummification, a ritual born not from science, but from devotion. Piece by piece they reassemble Osiris, all except one, the phallus. Yep, Set threw that one into the Nile, and it got swallowed by a fish. Tragic. So what does Isis do? She crafts a magical replacement, a golden prosthetic, enchanted and gleaming, and through divine magic, plus maybe a moonlit moment we won't get into too deeply, she conceives a child. That child will be Horus, the falcon-headed god of kingship, vengeance, and eyeliner sharp enough to kill a man. But that story's still warming up. For now, all you need to know is this. Isis resurrects Osiris just long enough to conceive their son. And then, Osiris dies again. Not violently this time. He doesn't fight it. He sinks quietly into the underworld, where he will remain. Not as a corpse, not as a victim, but as a king. Osiris becomes the ruler of the Duat, the Egyptian afterlife. He sits on a throne of obsidian and shadow, judging the souls of the dead. The god who brought civilization to the living now brings order to the dead. Here's your historical fact. Osiris wasn't just a story character. He was the god of the afterlife for Egyptians across dynasties. Priests held entire festivals reenacting his death and rebirth. Citizens believed that, by identifying with Osiris, they too could survive death and live forever in the fields of reeds, a paradise beyond the veil. Your quirky fact tonight. In some magical spells from the pyramid texts, Isis's golden prosthetic wasn't just for symbolic purposes. It was functional, as in, they believed it worked. Egyptian myth didn't have time for metaphors when it came to divine reproduction. If something needed to happen, magic made it happen. End of discussion. And now, for your scholarly debate, some academics argue that the Osiris cycle wasn't originally a full-blown myth, but a set of scattered rituals and symbols that were eventually woven into a coherent narrative by priests. Others believe it was always meant to be a cohesive myth, designed to unify Egyptian beliefs about death, kingship, and fertility. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, a patchwork of ancient ideas that solidified into a myth powerful enough to last thousands of years. Back in the marshes, the wind whispers through reeds. Isis lays Osiris's wrapped body in a hidden tomb, her hand resting gently on his chest. The stars are rising. Set is still on the throne, but something has changed. A seed has been planted, literally and metaphorically. Horus is growing far from Set's eyes, and a reckoning is coming. For now you lie still beside the god in the coffin, listening to the soft flapping of ibis wings, the rustle of linen, the quiet resolve of a goddess who won't let love be erased. The air is thick with jasmine and secrets, and somewhere deep in the underworld a king opens his eyes. So here we are, tucked into the shadowy marshes of the Nile delta, with Osiris resting in his secret tomb beneath layers of linen, magic, and quiet sorrow. The world above has shifted. Set is on the throne, drunk on power and paranoia. The Nile still flows, but it runs colder somehow. People whisper. Crops don't grow as well. Storms seem sharper, more personal. Egypt is unbalanced, because the rightful king is dead. The underworld now has a ruler, and justice is nowhere to be found. But something else is stirring deep in the reeds. Isis is hiding. Not because she's afraid, not even close. She's hiding because she's pregnant with the only hope of restoring what was lost. Inside her is Horus. son of Osiris, heir to the throne, child of divine vengeance and carefully planned resurrection. But for now, he's just a baby. And Set? He would kill that child the moment he knew it existed. So Isis disappears into the marshes, where she prepares to raise a god in secret. Picture it. The delta is all green tangles and slow-moving water. Crocodiles slip between the reeds. Birds wheel overhead, silent as guilt. Isis builds a makeshift home in the thickest part of the swamp, hidden from divine eyes, surrounded by illusion and protective spells. She becomes a mother, a warrior, and a fugitive all at once. Every day she gathers herbs and food. Every night she weaves protective incantations while baby Horus sleeps beside her. And he's not a chill baby. He's divine, sure, but he's also sick a lot. Bitten by scorpions, stung by spirits, cursed by stray whispers of Set's magic. Raising the saviour of Egypt is not glamorous. This is where the story gets surprisingly tender. Isis isn't shown as some detached, all-powerful sorceress during this period. She's vulnerable, desperate. There's even a story where Horus is dying from a scorpion sting and Isis runs door to door begging villagers to help. Most of them turn her away, but one woman, just one, takes her in. And in that woman's home, Isis heals her child using spells that become legendary. Ancient Egyptians would eventually copy those same spells onto amulets, papyri and tomb walls, hoping they could protect their own children from harm. That's how relatable this moment was. Even gods had to beg for help. Even gods cried at night when their babies were in danger. Here's a historical fact that adds weight to that. In many Egyptian healing rituals, Isis is invoked first and foremost, not just as a goddess, but as the mother who knew suffering, who overcame grief, and who never stopped fighting for her child. To this day, statues of her nursing baby Horus look suspiciously similar to later depictions of the Virgin Mary with infant Jesus. Coincidence? Or just proof that powerful stories echo forever? Now, let's hit the fringe a bit. Some lesser-known versions of this myth include a squad of 7 magical scorpions who serve as Isis's bodyguards during her exile. Yes, 7 scorpions with names and personalities who follow her through the swamps, guarding her child. One of them, named Tefen, sacrifices himself to absorb a curse meant for Horus. That's right, we're in loyal, self-sacrificing scorpion sidekick territory now. This is Egyptian mythology, remember? Nobody's too weird to be sacred. Meanwhile, Set grows restless. He senses that something's off, that maybe he didn't actually win after all. The throne feels colder under him. His nightmares are filled with the flutter of falcon wings. He storms through the temples demanding loyalty. He punishes priests who hesitate. He orders spies to sweep the marshes, but they find nothing, because Isis is always one step ahead. And Horus? He grows. He learns how to shapeshift. He practices flying. He becomes fast, sharp, and fierce. The gods watch from a distance, whispering. Some support Isis. Others think maybe Set's chaos is better for the times. The balance of Mayat, the cosmic order, is fraying at the edges. Egypt is holding its breath. Let's pause for a scholarly debate moment. Some Egyptologists argue that this whole period, the hiding, the illness, the raising of Horus, represents a kind of divine gestation cycle. Not just a literal pregnancy, but a metaphor for spiritual preparation. Horus isn't just being raised, he's becoming the avenger, the restorer of balance. Others suggest it reflects the Nile's agricultural cycle, the flooding, Osiris's death, the sowing, Isis's pregnancy, and the reaping, Horus's eventual rise. It's myth as metaphor, myth as mirror. Eventually Horus reaches adulthood, and here's where things get interesting. He doesn't just walk up to Set and say, "Hey, I'm the rightful heir, please move." No, because this is Egypt. There's a divine trial first, but we're not there yet. Before that, Isis decides it's time to make her presence known. She brings Horus out of hiding. They travel to the Ennead, the Council of Gods, those original creators and cosmic overseers, and demand justice. Picture a heavenly courtroom carved in stone and starlight, where gods debate laws older than time. Horus declares that he is Osiris's son, the rightful king. Isis stands behind him, robes dark, eyes bright, magic coiled in her fingers. Set, of course, shows up too. He sneers. He lies. He argues that Horus is too young, too emotional, too weak to rule. He says he has kept Egypt stable while everyone else was hiding or dead. And honestly, the gods aren't immediately sure who to side with. It's not a cut and dried situation. The Ennead argues for 80 years. Yes, 80 years. The gods bicker, wander off, get bored, reconvene. At one point, Ra, old and sun-weary, basically says, "Can't we just let Set keep ruling and avoid more drama?" Which, wow, thanks, Grandpa. But during that long wait, while cosmic bureaucracy stalls justice, Horus is training. He's not idle. He goes through trials, physical and magical. He loses an eye in a battle with Set, a brutal, painful, symbolic moment that scars him forever. But the eye doesn't vanish. It's restored by Thoth, the god of wisdom, and becomes the famous Eye of Horus, a symbol of protection, healing, and divine power. You've seen it. Every souvenir shop in Cairo has it. It's that famous. And here's your historical fact. Egyptians wore Eye of Horus amulets not just as jewellery, but as medicine. It was believed to restore health, ward off curses, and protect the soul in the afterlife. That little spiral under the eye, it's a measurement symbol. The whole thing is steeped in math and magic. Meanwhile, a quirky sidebar. There's a version of the story where Isis tries to trick Set during the trial by disguising herself as a mortal widow and telling a fake sob story about someone stealing her son's inheritance. The gods all agree that the thief should be punished. Then Isis reveals her identity and says, "So, you do support Horus's claim after all?" It's the mythological equivalent of a courtroom mic drop. Set is furious. The gods are awkwardly impressed. Back in the marshes, the world feels different now. The air has a charge to it, like a summer storm rolling in. The birds are quieter. Even the Nile seems to run faster. You lie low among the reeds, listening to the distant sound of wings overhead. The shifting of power far away in the heavens. Horus is no longer a child. Isis is no longer in hiding, and the fight for Egypt has only just begun. So let's talk about Horus. Not baby Horus with scorpion allergies, not falcon fledgling. Horus training in the swamps, but full-grown, eyes blazing, rage simmering Horus the Avenger. This is the version of him that steps out of the reeds like a storm in slow motion. Broad wings, cold stare, a scarred face with one eye sharper than justice, and the other just recently patched up by divine magic. This isn't a boy anymore. This is the living consequence of everything Set has tried to bury. And oh, Set feels it. Now, this isn't some tidy 3-act showdown. The conflict between Horus and Set stretches across myth like a never-ending chess match. It's not just one battle, it's dozens. Some are cosmic, some are weirdly petty, some are full-on WWE, with gods transforming into animals and body-slamming each other across dimensions. Welcome to the Divine Vengeance Saga, ancient Egypt's longest-running family feud. It begins when Horus finally steps out into public as Osiris's heir. He walks up to the Ennead, the big divine council, and says, "It's mine, Egypt is mine, you all know it." And honestly, a lot of the gods nod in agreement. I mean, his dad was murdered, dismembered, stuffed in a tree, and resurrected with some very creative prosthetics. The throne should be his. End of story, right? Except Set isn't going down without a fight. Instead of just denying the claim, Set says, "Let's test him. Let's put him through trials. If he wins, fine. But if not, I keep the crown." And the gods, in their classic fence-sitting style, say, "Sure, sounds fair." So begins a series of contests so wild you'd think someone was writing fan fiction. First they race boats, but not just any boats. Set carves his from solid stone, showing off like the god of flexing. Horus, meanwhile, cleverly disguises a wooden boat to look like stone. Set sinks immediately. Horus glides to victory. Score 1 for the falcon. Then come the transformations. Set becomes a hippo, because of course he does, and challenges Horus to a watery duel. The two gods smash into each other beneath the Nile, turning the river into a roiling mess of divine fury. Set may have the power of brute strength, but Horus has speed, precision, and generational trauma fueling every punch. Now here's where things get deeply uncomfortable. There's a version of the myth where Set tries to sexually dominate Horus to humiliate him. Yes, it's that level of petty. This wasn't about desire, it was about power, shame, and psychological warfare. But Horus, ever clever, sees it coming. He catches Set's, fluid, and throws it into the Nile before it touches him. Then, with Isis's help, he smears his own on Set's lettuce, yes, really, and Set eats it. The gods later call in Thoth to magically scan both of them. When Set's body lights up with Horus's essence, the council erupts in laughter. Set storms out humiliated. Horus, 2. Set, emotionally wrecked. Now pause for a breath, because wow, your historical fact. The trials between Horus and Set were so culturally significant that some of them were dramatised in temple rituals. Priests would perform versions of these contests, minus the lettuce thing, one hopes, to reenact the struggle for Ma'at, or cosmic balance. Pharaohs were seen as living embodiments of Horus, inheriting not just the crown, but also the weight of all that old divine baggage. And your fringe fact, in some alternate myths, Horus kills Set. Straight up ends him. But those versions are rare, and mostly rejected in the long-standing religious narrative, which preferred cosmic balance over absolute victories. Even chaos has to exist somewhere. You can't have light without shadow, order without a little madness. Set, frustratingly, has to live. Let's zoom in on one of the most emotionally charged parts of the saga, the eye. During a particularly brutal battle, Set gouges out Horus's left eye, not just physically, but spiritually. This isn't just damage, it's trauma. That eye represents more than sight. It's intuition, balance, divine insight. Losing it almost breaks Horus. But then Thoth steps in, god of scribes, wisdom, and fixing broken things. He carefully restores the eye, not just to how it was, but better. More complete. A symbol now, not just a tool. That restored eye, the Wadjet, is one of the most recognisable symbols in the ancient world. Half moon under the eye, a teardrop shape curling below, all meticulously measured. The parts of the eye were said to represent fractions used in Egyptian math, each slice symbolic of a different human sense. It's geometry, magic, and healing all in one. So, naturally, Horus doesn't keep it. He gives the eye to Osiris, not metaphorically, like actually gives it. He descends to the underworld, finds his father seated on the throne of the dead, and offers the eye as a gift, a sacrifice, a promise. It's like saying, "Here, you made me, you died for this, so take this part of me, and rise." And Osiris does rise, not to return to the land of the living, but to ascend to his final role as judge of the dead. With Horus's eye empowering him, he becomes something more than just a murdered king. He becomes the filter through which all souls must pass. The measure, the final answer. Back in the land of the living, the divine court finally rules. After decades, maybe even centuries of debate, the gods declare Horus the rightful king. He is crowned with the white and red crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt. His rule begins not just as a political victory, but as a restoration of the cosmic order. Now for the scholarly debate. Some researchers argue that the Horus-Set conflict reflects actual historical struggles in early Egyptian history, possibly between rival tribes or dynasties. The myth, in that view, isn't just myth. It's political memory dressed in divine robes. Others see it more abstractly, the battle between order and chaos, youth and experience, future and past. Whatever the case, the myth's emotional resonance, betrayal, justice, healing, has kept it alive for over 4 millennia. As for Set, he isn't executed or erased. He's given a new job. He becomes the god who protects Ra's solar boat from Apophis, the chaos serpent, each night. Which is hilarious if you think about it. The god of betrayal becomes the night shift security guard for the sun, chaos fighting chaos to protect order. So as the stars emerge and the night folds around you, imagine the final scene, Horus on the throne, Isis beside him, proud and quiet, Osiris in the underworld judging souls with the eye of his son, and Set, out in the blackness, teeth bared, spearing giant chaos worms so the sun can rise again. Justice, in Egypt, isn't about erasing darkness, it's about balance. You close your eyes beneath the quiet arc of Nut, the sky goddess, her body stretched over the world like a blanket of stars. The wind is still. The falcon god sleeps with one eye open. the throne has been restored, and the world exhales, so Horus is finally king. After years, maybe centuries depending on how you measure divine courtroom time, he's wearing both crowns, Upper and Lower Egypt balanced on his brow like a cosmic mic drop. Isis stands beside him, Set is banished to the night shift, and all the gods give each other awkward side eyes like, well, glad that's over. But here's the thing, Egyptian mythology doesn't really do clean endings. It doesn't do happily ever after. Because balance isn't a one-time achievement, it's a constant negotiation. And even though Horus is on the throne, the universe is far from stable. Case in point, Ra. Old sun god Ra has been in the background this whole time, like an ancient glowing grandfather clock, ticking steadily through every age. He's been watching this whole Osiris-Horus saga play out from his solar barge, sailing across the sky by day and slipping into the underworld by night. And while Horus might be king of Egypt now, Ra is still the god of everything, the big boss, the CEO of creation. And like a lot of senior executives, Ra is starting to lose patience with, well, everything. You see, Ra has been doing this job since the beginning, since Atum sneezed the first gods into existence. He's old, he's tired, and the humans? The humans are getting loud. They're not just praying and building temples anymore, they're arguing, complaining, forgetting to do the morning rituals. Someone probably drew a crude doodle of Ra on a wall somewhere, and now the sun god is deeply insulted. So Ra decides to remind everyone who's boss, in a very calm, measured, and absolutely terrifying way. He calls a council of the gods and says basically, hey, humanity's forgotten their place, should we wipe them out? And everyone goes quiet. Because Ra's not just spitballing. He's about to unleash one of the most feral beings in the Egyptian pantheon, Sekhmet. Sekhmet is a lion-headed goddess and not the cuddly kind. She's the nuclear option. When Ra created her, he took the Eye of Ra, his magical, wandering alter ego, and turned it into a physical being. Sekhmet is beauty and rage and burning sandstorms wrapped in muscle and claws. She's vengeance incarnate. Ra gives her one command, punish the humans, and oh, she does. She descends upon the earth like a heat wave with fangs. Villages burn, fields turn to ash. People run screaming through the desert. It's less of a battle and more of a divine bloodbath. Sekhmet doesn't just kill, she enjoys it. And that's the problem, because even after Ra says, okay, that's enough, she's not ready to stop. She's in the zone. She wants more. So Ra panics a little, because now he's got a goddess he can't control, and she's on an extinction-level murder spree. Time for some creative damage control. He orders that a massive amount of beer be dyed red to look like blood and poured across the land. When Sekhmet comes racing into another village, she sees the red flood and thinks, more blood! Yay! She drinks it. A lot of it. So much that she gets very, very drunk. She stumbles around, forgets about her bloodlust, and falls asleep in the sand. And that's how humanity survives, through divine trickery and one very regrettable hangover. Sekhmet, when she wakes up, is changed. She's still powerful, still terrifying, but Ra calms her down. Over time, she evolves into Bastet, a gentler form of feline divinity. She becomes the cat goddess of home, fertility, perfume, and naps in sunbeams. People start leaving out sources of milk and incense instead of sacrificing entire villages. It's a glow-up, basically. Now here's your historical fact. Temples dedicated to Sekhmet and Bastet existed side by side in some cities, showing that Egyptians didn't see these as contradictory deities. They understood duality. A lioness could be both protector and destroyer. A cat could purr in your lap or claw your face off. Same goddess, different moods. Fringe fact for tonight. In some rituals, statues of Sekhmet were believed to physically embody her presence, so much so that priests would perform daily offerings and even speak softly around them, just in case she overheard and decided to go full apocalypse again. You know, just casual workplace tension with a murder lion statue watching you. Now, back to the Eye of Ra for a second. Remember that wandering divine eye isn't just a character, it's a force. Sometimes it's Sekhmet, sometimes Hathor, sometimes a literal disk of fire in the sky. It represents Ra's ability to see and act, his projection of power. But it has a bad habit of getting bored and running away. There are stories where the eye leaves Ra, goes rogue, and hides in a faraway land. When that happens, all light disappears, crops fail, people panic. Ra has to send other gods to coax it back, usually with flattery, gifts and promises to behave better, which leads to tonight's scholarly debate. Was Ra's power declining as Horus's was rising? Some mythologists believe the Horus versus Set arc represents a generational shift, from the old solar dynasty of Ra to a more earthbound, kingship-focused world of Horus. Others argue that Ra was never meant to be replaced, just complemented. Horus rules the earthly realm. Ra continues to illuminate the heavens, 2 thrones, 2 domains. It's not retirement, it's redistribution. Still, Ra seems more distant now. He no longer micromanages everything. He sails his boat across the sky by day, slipping beneath the horizon each evening to begin the much more terrifying night shift, journeying through the Duat, the underworld, where chaos lurks and time unravels. We'll get to that madness later. For now, you just need to know this. Every night the sun dies. And every morning it returns, not because of science, because Ra survives the night, because chaos didn't win, but those battles are fought in secret, beneath the earth, while mortals sleep and the gods tremble quietly. You roll over beneath the arc of the stars, thinking about Ra's eye, a flame that sees everything, that sometimes wanders, that sometimes burns too hot. You picture Sekhmet sleeping off her rage somewhere in the desert, purring like a bonfire. You remember that gods, like people, are complex, and sometimes balance is just barely held together by red beer and desperation. The sun will rise tomorrow, but only because the gods make it rise. You open your eyes to the heat of sunlight brushing your cheek, warm and slow like a whispered secret. But it's not just any sun. It's Ra's sun, divine, deliberate, and possibly exhausted from battling nightmare fuel all night just to get back to this sky. Because as you now know, every single day is part of a cosmic commute, and Ra, he's doing the worst carpool in history. Let's set the scene. Picture a shimmering golden boat sailing across the sky, not floating on water, but on the daylight itself. This is the Manjet, or bark of millions of years, and Ra rides it like the CEO of existence. His crew, a who's who of the pantheon, gods who steer, gods who chant, gods who protect. And every morning, they push off from the eastern horizon, gliding westward until sunset. To you and me, that's just the sun rising and setting, but to the ancient Egyptians, this was a daily battle, because once Ra disappears over the western edge of the world, he's not kicking back for a siesta. He's plunging straight into the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, an acid trip of darkness, fire, monsters and metaphysical puzzles, and he has to get through all of it by dawn, or the sun won't rise again. That's not just poetic, that's terrifying. Let's break down this divine cruise. During the day, the boat sails smoothly. Ra beams from the deck, shining light, warmth, and casual divine judgment across the land. Mortals praise him. Farmers water their crops. Priests burn incense. It's his time to shine, literally. But the second he slips below the horizon, everything changes. The Mesektet, or night bark, takes over. The gods swap shifts. The crew gets weird. And Ra goes from being a sky king to a wartime commander navigating one of the most dangerous realms in mythology. The Duat isn't just a gloomy afterlife. It's a hostile labyrinth of gates, lakes of fire, flesh-eating beetles, snake-legged demons, and geography that changes every hour. Time bends, language melts, logic does not apply. It's like an after-hours rave thrown by your subconscious and set on hard mode. But Ra doesn't go in unprepared. He's got an army of spells, a team of gods, and his greatest weapon, light. Specifically, the power to blind, burn, and push back the monstrous forces that lurk in the shadows. And leading those forces is his eternal nemesis, Apophis. Apophis, also called Apep, is a chaos serpent so massive, so ancient, that he predates light itself. He's not evil in the moustache-twirling sense, he's worse. He's the embodiment of unmaking, of randomness, of cosmic entropy. Every night he tries to swallow the sun, not metaphorically, literally. He coils around the boat, stretching across the entire Duat like a demonic anaconda, jaws wide, ready to bite through time itself. Now every religion has some version of a cosmic enemy, Satan, Loki, the end of days. But Apophis, he doesn't make speeches, He doesn't have a goal. He just wants everything to end, permanently. And it's up to Ra and his crew to stop him, every single night. So how do they do it? Sometimes Ra blinds him with the light of his own face. Sometimes Set, yes, that's Set, leaps onto the boat with a spear and stabs Apophis through the eye. Set's chaotic energy is finally good for something. Other times the gods chant spells so ancient they don't even make grammatical sense anymore, warping reality around them. And sometimes they fail. There are myths where Apophis actually does swallow the sun. Everything goes black, the stars vanish, the world holds its breath. But then the gods fight harder. They slice Apophis open from the inside. Ra bursts free, glowing even brighter. Dawn arrives with a vengeance, and everyone pretends they weren't panicking. Your historical fact tonight? Temples in ancient Egypt performed nightly rituals specifically to aid Ra in this journey. Priests would recite Apophis-slaying spells, burn serpent effigies, and even draw protective circles around sacred spaces to symbolically join the battle. It wasn't just metaphor, it was spiritual warfare, scheduled nightly. And now for your quirky little fringe fact. In some versions of the myth, Apophis isn't dead at all, he can't be. He's eternal. Even when cut into 1,000,000 pieces, he reforms by nightfall, which means Ra isn't just slaying a serpent, he's slaying the same serpent, every night. Imagine the psychological toll. You destroy something with maximum effort, only to wake up and have to destroy it again, forever. It's like mythological Groundhog Day with more scales and existential dread. Let's now dip into our scholarly debate of the night. Was Apophis an invention of religious propaganda, or a metaphor for real cosmic fears? Some Egyptologists argue that he represents natural disasters, eclipses, droughts, famines. Others say he's a personification of death itself, lurking in the dark, always waiting. A few suggest he was used as a way to justify the pharaoh's rituals. Look, if we don't support the king, the sun might not come back. Convenient, sure, but also effective. Regardless of the interpretation, the message is clear. Order is not guaranteed. Ma'at, the balance of the universe, is a daily labour. It must be renewed, defended, even fought for. There is no autopilot in Egyptian cosmology. The sun rises not because of physics, but because a tired ancient god wrestles a snake in hell all night and wins. Again. And now, back in the sky, the bark rises once more. You can almost see the golden curve of its hull cresting the horizon. The morning light spills over the dunes, pushing back the last shreds of night. Birds stir, priests exhale. Somewhere far below, Apophis hisses in the dark, already coiling for tomorrow. You lie in your bed, or on your couch, or wherever you've chosen to let this story tuck you in. Outside, the sky's turning that soft, sleepy blue. Whether it's real dawn or just a digital clock glowing beside you, you know the sun's returned, not just because of celestial motion, but because some ancient part of your mind still remembers the myth, and in that golden light everything feels possible again. You'd think after all that. Ra's nightly chaos tour, Horus's messy rise to power, Osiris ruling the underworld with his sun's eye socket still pulsing with magic, the world might finally settle down. But no, because while Ra is back up in the sky, squinting at mortals and pretending he's not burnt out, there's still one giant cosmic nuisance slithering around that refuses to stay dead. That's right, tonight we're having a face-to-fang encounter with the embodiment of chaos itself, Apophis, or Apep, if you're on nickname terms. But don't get too friendly. Apophis is less of a god, and more of an existential threat with scales. He has no temples, no prayers, no cult following trying to summon him with incense and good vibes. You don't worship Apophis. You try not to get eaten by him. He is, quite literally, the opposite of everything the Egyptians believed kept the world turning. He's not chaos like your room when you haven't done laundry in 3 weeks. He's chaos like the unravelling of time, the void that stares back, the reason you sometimes wake up at 3 a.m. with a feeling that something's not quite right. Every night, he tries to undo creation, and not metaphorically, like actually unmake reality. Picture him, an enormous serpent so massive he could circle the world, with eyes that drip venom and scales that shimmer like oil on dark water. His body coils through the underworld, blocking Ra's solar bark as it passes, and while yes, Set somehow still employed as cosmic bouncer, usually leaps in to help spear him through the face, Apophis never really dies. He can't. He's a recurring nightmare that reincarnates at sundown like it's on a cursed loop. Let's zoom in on one particular story that shows just how absurdly dedicated the Egyptians were to not letting this thing win. So Ra is doing his nightly underworld commute, which by now we know is a blend of monster slaying, soul judging, and probably mild deity road rage. Apophis appears again, this time bigger, louder, angrier. He casts a spell, yes, a chaos serpent that does magic, and causes the river the boat sails on to stop flowing. That's like slamming the brakes on a cosmic freeway. Ray's boat gets stuck. Time pauses. The sun stalls in the underworld. Cue collective panic. Luckily, Ra's crew is loaded with gods who apparently double as magical engineers. One of them recites a spell so powerful it restarts the river. Another throws chains of light around Apophis. Then Set, in his one redeemable role, hurls a spear the size of a temple and pins Apophis to the floor. Ra's bark jerks forward, Apophis howls, the spell breaks, and time ticks on. Again. But here's the kicker. This event was so important, Egyptian priests recreated it every single day. That's your historical fact. Rituals to defeat Apophis weren't just abstract prayers. They were specific, methodical, and often included burning wax effigies of the serpent, stomping on them, spitting, cursing, and sometimes even urinating on them. Yes, you heard that right. The Egyptian priesthood had a literal handbook of chaos slaying that included yelling insults at snake dolls. Imagine showing up to temple and hearing the morning chant, "May you be consumed, Apophis. May your body rot, may your tail turn to ash, and may you stay very dead this time." But Apophis didn't care. You could insult him, stab him, light him on fire, and he'd still be back tomorrow night. There's something depressingly familiar about that, isn't there? The idea that you have to fight the same battle every day. That darkness doesn't stay gone. That fear, anxiety, doubt, whatever your personal Apophis is, keeps coming back no matter how many times you spear it. That's what makes the myth so quietly powerful. It doesn't promise an end. It promises that the fight is worth it. Now here's your fringe fact for the night. Some texts claim that Apophis didn't just attack Ra. He actually attacked the stars, like physically. During eclipses or strange sky events, Egyptians believed Apophis was biting at the stars and swallowing pieces of the night. And that image of a monster in the dark literally eating the sky is about as metal as ancient religion gets. Scholarly debate time. There's some argument among Egyptologists about whether Apophis was always meant to be part of the myth, or whether he was added later as a kind of narrative tool, a shadow to sharpen the light. Some believe he evolved from older serpent gods, while others argue he was a distinct concept from the start. Not a god, but anti-god. A force, not a being. The difference is subtle, but important. Gods can be worshipped. Forces have to be endured. But let's step back. Because here's the most interesting thing. Apophis is never seen on the surface world. You don't encounter him during the day, or in temples, or when you're alive. He exists in the dark corners of the world, of the mind, of the soul. You only face him when you're travelling through the Duat, when you're dead, or dreaming, or afraid. He's the shadow at the edge of the torchlight. The whisper in the catacombs, and the gods fight him every single night. Not because they think they can destroy him once and for all, but because they know they can't. Which brings us back to you. You're lying in the quiet, maybe in your bed, maybe in a hotel room, maybe on a couch that isn't yours. The room is still, but somewhere in your own version of the Duat, the part of you that flinches at silence, or wakes at 2:47 a.m. for no reason, something coils and waits, and you realise the Egyptians didn't believe in easy endings. They believed in rising every day and fighting back anyway. The sun will rise not because it's supposed to. It rises because the gods refuse to let it stay swallowed, and so will you. So after all that, gods dueling in courtrooms, solar barges cutting through the underworld like ghost ships on fire, serpents chewing on time, it's starting to feel like everyone in this mythology could use a nap. But nope, we're not slowing down. In fact, yeah, we're about to dive into one of the most mysterious, temperamental, and downright unhinged aspects of the Egyptian divine world, the Eye of Ra. Now, you've seen this thing before, probably on a pendant at some market stall or tattooed behind someone's ear at a music festival. That stylized eye with the little spiral, that's the Eye of Horus, a symbol of protection and healing. But, and here's the kicker, the Eye of Ra. Different beast entirely. It's not just an icon or a body part. It's a living force, a weapon, a goddess, a mood. It's whatever Ra needs it to be, and usually that means trouble. You see, Ra doesn't always handle stress well. He's a divine being, yes, but he's also ancient, paranoid, and just a little power mad. And when he's annoyed, or when he senses that the cosmic order is slipping, he doesn't give speeches or send out strongly worded letters. He sends the eye. And the eye? It doesn't knock. It kicks down the door. Sometimes it's Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess who once almost wiped out all of humanity. Sometimes it's Hathor, the beer-loving cow goddess who throws off disco mom energy. Sometimes it's Bastet, who might purr sweetly before scratching your face off. And sometimes it's just the eye. A living fiery entity that flies off without warning and doesn't check in. That's the core of this myth. Ra sends out the eye to do his bidding. It obeys, for a while. But eventually the eye decides it's not just a servant. It's a goddess in its own right. It gets ideas. It grows teeth. It leaves. And Ra, well, he panics. There's one myth where the eye literally runs away from Ra, flies into the desert and disappears. And when it does, the world starts to fall apart. The Nile dries up. Crops fail. Everything living begins to wither. Because the Eye of Ra isn't just some magical security system, it's the force of life itself. Sunlight, warmth, power. Without it, the world cools, the gods get twitchy, and Ra becomes just an old man mumbling to himself in a golden boat. So what does he do? He sends a search party. Gods are dispatched across the realms, both the seen and unseen, to track down the eye and coax it back. And this is not a casual errand. This is like trying to convince your ex-girlfriend, who is also a lioness with laser vision, to come back to a toxic relationship and work things out. Good luck with that. Eventually, the eye is found, raging, wounded, proud, and she's not exactly thrilled about being summoned. Depending on the version, she has to be tricked into returning. Some stories say they send Thoth, the chill, bookish god of wisdom, to sweet-talk her with riddles and metaphysical flattery. Others say they bribe her with shiny gifts and sacred beer. Either way, it's a tense negotiation, and when she does return, Ra celebrates. The world breathes again. Warmth floods the land, but deep down everyone knows the eye might leave again. She's unpredictable, necessary, and kind of terrifying. It's like keeping a wild tiger in your bedroom because you're cold at night. Sure, she keeps you warm, but one wrong move and you're toast. Here's your historical fact. The Eye of Ra was central to temple rituals, especially in solar cults. Pharaohs were often equated with the eye, an extension of divine authority. But unlike Horus's eye, which symbolized restoration, the Eye of Ra was about control, domination, power enforced through fear. Every time a king marched into battle, the eye went with him, not as protection, but as a warning. Obey or burn. Now your fringe fact. In some lesser-known hymns, the eye is described as the one who dances in blood, and she who devours worlds. So yeah, not exactly bedtime lullaby material. One poem even calls her the rage in Ra's heart, suggesting that she's not just an entity, but his emotional outlet. Ancient Egyptians invented the concept of sending your anger to do your dirty work, centuries before the term emotional outsourcing could even exist. And here's where things get even more tangled. The eye isn't just a weapon. She's also the mother of kings. She births creation. She's the life force that animates gods and mortals alike. Which leads us to a favourite scholarly paradox. How can one being be both destroyer and creator? Some Egyptologists argue that the eye represents the full spectrum of solar energy, warmth and fire, nourishment and wrath. Others see her as a stand-in for political power, capricious, feminine, and wielded through charisma and terror in equal measure. But here's what makes it all so deeply human. The eye leaves. She doesn't follow orders blindly. She gets angry, disrespected, and exhausted. She needs time alone, space. She ghosts the entire universe for her own sanity. And if that's not the most relatable god behaviour in all of mythology, I don't know what is. Now let's wrap this up with a moment of stillness. Imagine the eye returning, rising above the horizon not as a ball of fire but as a golden presence, silent and glowing. She doesn't speak. She doesn't explain. She just resumes her place. The rivers flow again. The lotus blooms. The heat returns to your skin, and you lie beneath her watchful gaze. Not afraid, but aware. That warmth on your face, it's not just sunlight, it's mercy. Temporary conditional mercy. The gods don't promise comfort. They promise balance. And sometimes that means chaos must be reined in by something even more unpredictable. So close your eyes now under the weight of that divine stare. Feel the hush before the morning, when everything holds still. Somewhere out there, a goddess with fire in her eyes is deciding for tonight whether the world deserves to keep spinning. Let's hope she says yes. You're probably starting to notice a theme here. The Egyptian gods do not take things lightly. They're emotional, petty, brilliant, immortal, and just barely holding themselves together. And if Ra's anxiety-fueled solar eye wasn't enough, tonight we're cracking open the next chapter of divine instability with one of the most dramatic, blood-soaked episodes in the entire mythos, Sekhmet's rampage. This is the part of the story where the gods stop pretending everything's fine and decide to hit the reset humanity button. And by reset, I mean obliterate. Because humanity, as always, has messed up. They've started doubting the gods, whispering about Ra behind his back, getting bold, rebellious, and probably skipping offerings. Ra hears the gossip and does what any ancient deity in a crisis does. He calls a meeting. The divine council gathers, cloaked in silence and incense. Ra, old and furious, announces that mankind has forgotten its place, that they're spreading chaos, threatening Ma'at, the divine order, and he's not having it. He leans back in his throne, eyes glowing like two miniature suns, and says, "Fine, send Sekhmet." And just like that, she awakens. Sekhmet isn't born so much as unleashed. She's the Eye of Ra, weaponized to maximum intensity. Imagine a lioness forged from the desert sun, all claws and smoke and wrath. She descends into the mortal world not like a goddess, but like a plague, a living judgment. People don't get warnings, they get torn apart. The destruction of mankind, as this episode is politely called in ancient texts, is less of a battle and more of a divine feeding frenzy. Sekhmet roams city to city, village to village, slaughtering every human who's ever side-eyed a temple. She drinks the blood like wine. Her breath scorches the air. People try to run, try to hide, but you don't hide from a force like this. You just vanish. And here's the chilling part. Ra watches. At first he's satisfied. He thinks the punishment is fair, but soon even he begins to feel uneasy. Sekhmet isn't stopping. She's not just punishing rebels. She's going off script. This isn't cleansing, it's genocide. And Ra realizes, maybe a little too late, that he's created a monster he can't control. So he panics. He has to find a way to stop her, but not through direct confrontation. Because let's be real, Ra might be a sun god, but Sekhmet is divine rage incarnate. You don't fight her, you outsmart her. So he hatches a plan, and it is as ridiculous as it is brilliant. He orders thousands of jars of beer to be dyed red, so red it looks exactly like blood. Then he pours the beer out across the land, creating massive pools that shimmer like fresh carnage. When Sekhmet arrives in another doomed village, she sees the red flood and thinks, "More blood? Don't mind if I do." She drinks, and drinks, and drinks. The beer hits her hard. She stumbles, she roars, she gets sleepy. The sun sets, and the goddess of vengeance passes out in a drunken heap somewhere in the sand, blood-soaked and blissfully unaware that the world has just barely survived. That's your historical fact for the night. This myth was retold in sacred texts, often as part of New Year's rituals. The Egyptians believed that during the transition from one year to the next, chaos was at its strongest, so they would recite this story, drink beer dyed red, and celebrate the calming of Sekhmet. In a way, they were reenacting her sedation, hoping to lull her back into gentleness for another year. And here's your fringe fact, because you deserve weirdness with your mythology. Some scholars believe this myth may have inspired the tradition of drinking to excess during festivals like Tech, which involved music, dance, and, yes, lots of beer. It was a way to channel Sekhmet's energy safely, to party just enough that she'd be pleased, but not so much that she woke up again wanting blood. After her hangover nap, Sekhmet wakes changed, calmer, less bloodthirsty. She becomes softer, gentler, morphing into Bastet over time, the cat goddess of the home, music, fertility, and comfort. Not exactly harmless, mind you, she's still a cat, but less likely to eat your village just because someone forgot to refill the incense burner. Now for the scholarly debate of the night. Is Sekhmet really separate from Bastet, or are they two sides of the same coin? Some Egyptologists say they're distinct deities who eventually got blurred together. Others insist they were always part of a dual-natured force, one that reflects the duality of divine femininity in Egyptian thought, nurture and destruction, motherhood and death. The fact that the same goddess could rule over both healing and plague wasn't seen as contradictory. It was balance. Think about it. Sekhmet's name literally means she who is powerful. She's also the goddess of war and medicine. She destroys, yes, but she also protects. Her priests were doctors. Her temples were healing centres, because in ancient Egypt they knew the same force that can burn you down can also cure you. Fire sterilizes, pain warns, blood is life, and also the thing you lose when balance is broken. And that's the deeper truth here. Even chaos has its rhythm. So now picture Sekhmet, curled up under the stars, finally sleeping, the sand cooling beneath her. Ra breathes a sigh of relief. The humans crawl out of hiding. The Eye of Ra has returned, not because she was defeated, but because she chose to stop. You too lie still. The room is dark. Your breath is steady. You survived the lioness. The blood has dried. The gods, for now, are quiet. But in the corners of your mind, there's still that flicker, that fire that says power can be beautiful and terrifying, all in the same breath. The desert winds have calmed. Sekhmet's claws are back in their velvet sheath, and humanity, against all odds, is still alive, slightly traumatized, but alive. And while some gods go stomping through history with blood and thunder, others prefer a quieter sort of immortality. Tonight, we turn our attention away from lionesses and sun gods and slide quietly into the lamplit corner of the pantheon. Meet Thoth, god of wisdom, writing, and the kind of meticulous magical bookkeeping that keeps the whole world from falling apart. Thoth is the scribe of the gods, but don't mistake scribe for secretary. This isn't some robe-wearing intern taking meeting minutes. Thoth is a force of absolute order, intellect sharpened to a point, and logic strong enough to keep chaos, actual chaos, from slipping through the cracks. He's the guy who writes down the spells that make time exist, the god who invented language so the universe could speak itself into being. If Ra is the sun and Sekhmet is the sword, Thoth is the blueprint. Now, first things first, Thoth has the head of an ibis, which is kind of a weird flex. Not a hawk, not a lion, not even a falcon, just a long-beaked wading bird. He also sometimes shows up as a baboon. Why? Great question. The Egyptians believed the ibis was deeply intelligent, especially in its silent, observant posture. Plus, they liked that it kept to the water's edge, never fully of the land, never quite of the water. Just like Thoth himself, who exists not entirely among the gods, nor the mortals, but in that liminal space where magic becomes law. Legend says Thoth was self-created, like Atum, but nerdier. He wrote the words that spoke the world into structure. He counted the stars, calculated the movements of the heavens, and created the calendar so mortals could stop panicking every time the moon changed shape. Basically, he took the unknowable and turned it into an Excel sheet, and for that, we owe him big time. He's also the guy who came through multiple times when the other gods had made a mess and needed someone to fix it without asking too many questions. Remember when Isis needed Osiris's body reassembled? Thoth helped. When Horus lost his eye in battle and needed it restored? Thoth. Again. When the gods couldn't decide who should rule Egypt, Thoth kept the trial going with perfect transcripts and probably snuck in some sarcastic footnotes. This is your historical fact. Thoth wasn't just worshipped by priests. He was revered by scribes, astronomers, architects, and anyone who used knowledge to do their job. His main cult centre was at Hermopolis, the city of Hermes, because the Greeks saw Thoth and said, "That's just our Hermes with extra homework. and in that city the entire mythos of Egypt's creation was reshaped to centre him. In their version, Thoth doesn't just record creation, he triggers it. He speaks the words, and boom, the cosmos unfolds like a scroll. Now for your fringe fact, Thoth is rumoured to have written a mysterious book called the Book of Thoth, filled with spells so powerful they could let mortals understand the language of animals, raise the dead, or even become gods themselves. According to myth, anyone who read the book risked madness, curses, or worse, knowing too much. Naturally, every ancient librarian was obsessed with it. Some versions say it was hidden in a tomb, wrapped in chains, guarded by serpents. Others claim it was never real, just an idea, Thoth's ultimate riddle, knowledge that tempts but can never be safely possessed. Let's now consider the best part of Thoth's character. He doesn't have an ego about any of this. He's not trying to take Ra's throne or burn down cities. He's not building giant temples to himself or demanding sacrifices. Thoth is quiet power. He holds the line in a universe full of loud, chaotic, glitter-drenched deities, and he does it without complaint. If Ma'at is balance, Thoth is the scale itself. Speaking of Ma'at, he and the goddess of truth and cosmic order are basically best friends, or depending on the myth, lovers, twins, or two halves of the same metaphysical spreadsheet. Ma'at is the principle, Thoth is the procedure. If she is the feather on the scales of justice, he is the one recording the results. Together they ensure that when your soul reaches the afterlife, it doesn't just get judged, it gets documented. Now for the scholarly debate. Was Thoth always a separate deity, or was he a later invention to explain the rising complexity of Egyptian spiritual bureaucracy? Some argue he started as a moon god, because of his connection to calendars and nighttime rituals, and gradually became a catch-all symbol for intellectual magic. Others insist he was always the divine mind of Egypt, born of the people's need to make sense of a world ruled by lionesses and solar serpents. Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. Without Thoth, the myths unravel. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Every world needs that one character who remembers everything, the one who carries the maps, writes the legends, and, when necessary, steps in with a feather-light touch to fix the broken parts without needing applause. Thoth is the invisible hand behind the scenes. He's the god who watches you fail algebra and says, "Let me show you a better way." He's the one who believes that truth, written down and spoken clearly, can literally hold back the darkness. So as you lie there, breathing softly in the quiet spaces between your thoughts, imagine Thoth at his desk. Not a glowing throne or golden temple, just a simple table piled with scrolls. He dips his reed pen in ink made from starlight and memory. He writes your name, not because you're famous or powerful, but because everything deserves to be recorded. He draws a line through the chaos of your day and files it under survived. No judgment, just clarity. And when you finally sleep, know this: someone, somewhere, is keeping track. Not to punish, but to understand. After the intense bloodletting of Sekhmet and the precise quill of Thoth, you might be ready for something softer. Something you can actually pet without worrying about losing your face. Tonight, we pad quietly into the flickering candlelight of ancient Egypt's most beloved domestic goddess, Bastet, the cat who once roared like a lioness, then decided she preferred sunbeams and incense instead. Now, before you go imagining soft paws and lazy tail flicks, you should know Bastet wasn't always the chill, purring lap goddess you see on trinkets and crystal shop t-shirts. She started out as a fierce lion-headed warrior, a guardian of the pharaoh and a blood-drenched smiter of enemies. She stood watch at the edge of chaos, claws unsheathed, eyes glowing like twin suns, and was very much not the kind of cat who curls up on your pillow. But over time, something changed, or rather, Egypt changed. In the earliest periods, Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, Bastet's depictions were lioness forward, very Sekhmet adjacent. But as Egypt grew more urban, more prosperous, and, let's be honest, more into comfort, Bastet evolved too. The war cat softened. The bloodthirsty protector of royalty became the sweet goddess of hearth and home, music, fertility, perfume, and yes, actual domestic cats. Suddenly, she wasn't just divine, she was familiar, approachable, the kind of deity who might sit beside you during dinner, accepting offerings of roast duck and purring softly in approval. Her temples became places of joy. People didn't go there to beg for salvation. They went to dance, drink wine, and leave tributes of sweet oils and fragrant myrrh. Bastet wanted your devotion, sure, but she'd settle for a good party and a bit of tuna. This brings us to Bubastis, her cult centre in the Nile Delta. It wasn't just a city, it was her city. Every year during her festival, thousands would sail in from all across Egypt. The ancient historian Herodotus, who may or may not have exaggerated for dramatic effect, claimed that hundreds of thousands of people would flood the city, drinking, singing, and getting delightfully irresponsible in the goddess's honour. Think of it like a cat-themed Mardi Gras, but with more amulets. Here's your historical fact for the evening. Bastet was one of the most widely worshipped deities in the Egyptian pantheon, especially during the late period. Her popularity wasn't just political or religious, it was personal. Ordinary Egyptians loved her. They kept cats in the home not just for pest control, but because they were sacred to her. Killing a cat, even by accident, was considered a capital crime, and when a beloved feline died, families mummified them, complete with tiny sarcophagi, and offered them at Bastet's temples. Yes, there were entire necropolises for cats. And no, this isn't some fringe cult thing. We're talking millions of mummified cats discovered near Bubastis and other sites. Some carefully preserved, others, let's say, hastily wrapped. Demand was high, supply was variable. Fringe fact time. Some of the cat mummies archaeologists have found weren't even real cats. They were bundles of cloth stuffed with bones, feathers or clay, sold to pilgrims who couldn't afford a full-on sacred kitty. Basically, ancient Egypt had a booming black market in divine feline knockoffs. Catfish, in the most literal possible sense. Now here's the real beauty of Bastet. She wasn't a contradiction to the fierce lioness gods, she was their counterpoint. Where Sekhmet raged, Bastet soothed. Where Tefnut lashed out with storms, Bastet slipped between shadows and offered calm. She was the cool-down goddess, the one who reminded you that after war comes peace. After fire comes stillness. After the wild sun, the soft glow of lamplight on fur. But don't mistake her kindness for weakness. Bastet could protect her followers with deadly precision. She didn't need roaring. A well-placed scratch behind the veil. A curse whispered through whiskers. Subtle, elegant retribution. Thieves who broke into homes guarded by her could find themselves plagued by illness, bad luck, or mysteriously disappearing coin purses. Think mafia boss, but cuter and with better eyeliner. And let's talk about that eye. Bastet's feline gaze wasn't just decoration. In Egyptian magic, the cat's eye was symbolic of protection, foresight, and supernatural awareness. The kind of look that says, I know exactly where your soul has been, and I'm deciding whether you deserve to keep it. This leads us to a scholarly debate that gets spicy in Egyptology circles. Was Bastet truly a separate entity from Sekhmet, or were they flip sides of the same being? Some texts refer to them interchangeably, suggesting Bastet is Sekhmet when appeased. Others place them in opposite cities with rival priesthoods, hinting at political schisms and theological turf wars. There's also a third theory, that both goddesses stem from an even older feline deity, a primordial cat mother lost to time. Basically, the Divine Cat Club has deep lore, and no one fully agrees on who started it. But let's come back to you. Right now, maybe you're lying in a pool of warm light, a fan humming softly, the smell of something sweet drifting from the kitchen. Somewhere near you, if you're lucky, a cat has made itself impossibly heavy on your legs. Or maybe just the idea of one has crept into your thoughts. That's Bastet, goddess of sacred comfort, nocturnal watcher of thresholds, silent protector of dreams. She doesn't roar, she doesn't need to. Her strength is subtle, her power is in grace. She slips between rooms and worries, brushing against your ankle, then vanishing before you can say thank you. She watches from corners, she purrs when the balance is right, and when the dark comes for you, she does not rage. She waits, poised, claws tucked away, eyes unblinking. Because you are hers now. Let's shift gears, quietly, reverently, because now we're entering the threshold between the worlds. You've made it through cosmic boats, snake battles, and feline feasts, but this next part, it's where things start to hum with serious weight. Tonight, you walk into the shadows with Anubis, jackal-headed guardian of the dead, embalmer of kings, and silent patron of every soul who's ever wondered what comes next. Anubis is the god of mummification, of tombs, of all the moments that happen after the moment you stop breathing. He isn't loud. He doesn't make grand entrances. He slips in when the light dims, when the incense is lit, and when someone's whispering a name they're afraid to forget. If Osiris rules the underworld like a king on a throne of obsidian, Anubis is the one who opens the door. Let's talk about the head first. Jackal-headed. Why? Because in ancient Egypt, jackals were everywhere around tombs, scavengers, lurkers, always seen at the edge of burial sites like shadows sniffing at the edge of memory. Instead of fearing them, the Egyptians turned the jackal into a guardian. Anubis becomes the divine version, not a thief of corpses, but their protector, their guide, their embalmer. His job is exacting, sacred. Imagine it. You're a priest and someone important has died, a noble, a scribe, a merchant. You begin the process of mummification, knowing full well that it's not just ritual, it's myth in motion. Every wrapping, every ointment, every prayer echoes what Anubis did when Osiris was first torn apart. The god himself is said to have been the one who prepared Osiris's body, cleaning the pieces, embalming them, wrapping them with spell-etched linen, and giving him shape again. That moment becomes the blueprint for every funeral rite for the next few thousand years. Here's your historical fact. The process of mummification was deeply religious and symbolic. The embalmers often wore jackal masks to represent Anubis himself, invoking his guidance with every motion. They would recite specific prayers at each step of the procedure, speaking to the gods as if they were literally standing in the room. Because, in their minds, they were. Anubis doesn't just prepare the body, he guides the soul. When someone dies, their soul, called the Bay, travels into the underworld. But it's not just an open field with a sign that says, afterlife this way. It's more like a shifting labyrinth filled with trials, gates, monsters, and metaphysical red tape. And who stands beside you at the beginning? Anubis. But the moment he's most famous for, the one etched into tombs and echoed in modern Halloween decor, is the weighing of the heart. Picture this. The soul has made it to the Hall of Two Truths. The god Thoth is there with his scribal tools. Osiris waits on his black-throned seat. The 42 judges watch in silent anticipation. And Anubis? He stands at the scales, one hand resting on the lever, the other on the shoulder of the soul being judged. The process is simple, sort of. Your heart is placed on one side of the scale, on the other, a feather. Not just any feather, the feather of Maat, symbol of truth, balance, and the cosmic order. If your heart is lighter than the feather, you pass. You're clean. You're allowed to continue into the field of the reeds, a paradise of endless harvests, soft breezes, and long-lost loved ones waiting to greet you. But if your heart is heavier, well, then we meet Ammit. Let's take a moment here, because Ammit is not subtle. She's part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, basically a living blender of things that eat you. She sits by the scales, waiting hungrily. If your heart fails the test, Anubis doesn't flinch, he just nods. And Ammit devours your soul. No appeal, no retrieves, no reincarnation, just eternal oblivion. Anubis doesn't celebrate, he doesn't mourn, he just moves on to the next one. He's not cruel, he's not kind, he's the function of judgment without ego. Now for your fringe fact, in some lesser-known spells and funerary texts, Anubis is described as the opener of the ways, not just between the living and dead, but between the physical and spiritual, mortal and divine. In certain magical traditions, his name was invoked not just during burials, but also during initiations, meditations, even dreams. He was the boundary walker, the one who could slip between realms without being torn apart. That's what makes him so compelling. He isn't trapped in one place. He walks the edge. He works both sides. Now cue the scholarly debate. Is Anubis older than Osiris? Some Egyptologists argue that Anubis was the original lord of the underworld, long before Osiris arrived on the scene with his decapitated fanbase and wheatfield paradise. In the coffin texts, some early versions show Anubis as the primary judge. Later he steps back into more of a guiding role, perhaps absorbed into the Osiris cult for political or theological unity. He's a survivor, though. one of the few gods who remains consistently respected across every era, back to the Hall of Judgment. Can you imagine that moment? Your heart, your life, your deeds, your regrets, all weighed against a single feather. No excuses. No, but I meant well. Just the quiet presence of a jackal-faced god, watching you with eyes that have seen it all. And somehow, that's comforting. Because Anubis doesn't judge with anger. He doesn't punish from ego. He simply knows. He knows death. He knows fear. He knows the secret terrors that press against your chest in the dark. And yet, he stands beside you anyway. So now picture him walking beside you down the corridor of night. The air is still. Your footsteps make no sound. He says nothing, but you feel safer with him there. The jackal face is unreadable, but his presence is steady. Patient. He's walked this path for eternity. And he's never once lost a soul along the way. Not the good ones. And not you. So there you are, standing beside Anubis in the Hall of Two Truths, your metaphorical heart thumping against your metaphorical ribs, facing down a scale that might just erase you, and beside that scale, so light it floats in still air, is the feather of Maat. It doesn't glow, it doesn't shimmer, it just exists, perfect and silent, the single most important object in the entire Egyptian afterlife. You're about to meet the goddess who wears that feather in her hair. Tonight we step into the cool, measured presence of Maat, goddess of truth, justice, order, and the absolute backbone of Egyptian cosmology. If Ra is the sun and Thoth is the mind, Maat is the law. But not law like, don't run with scissors. Law like gravity, cosmic stability. The thing that keeps stars spinning and souls from unravelling. She's not flashy. She doesn't throw lightning or wage war. She simply is. Let's back up a bit. In the beginning, when Ra emerged from the formless waters of Nun and started creating the world, he didn't just throw things together and hope for the best. He established a structure, a rhythm, a balance. That balance, that was Maat. She's not just a goddess, she's a concept, a force, a universal operating system written in feathers and ethics. And yet, she is a goddess too, always depicted with a single ostrich feather rising from her crown, sometimes winged, sometimes standing tall, always calm. Her presence meant the world was functioning as it should. Crops were growing, people were speaking truth, the stars were behaving. Pharaohs invoked her name to legitimize their rule, not with brute strength, but with the claim that they upheld Maat. Your historical fact tonight: Maat wasn't just religious, she was deeply political. Every Egyptian pharaoh had beloved of Maat in their title. Courts swore by her. Scribes referenced her in legal texts. When a new king took power, the first thing he was expected to do was restore Maat, which might sound poetic, but actually meant get stuff under control, feed the people, and stop chaos from creeping in. And chaos was always waiting. The Egyptians called it Isfet, Maat's eternal opposite. Isfet wasn't a god. It was uncreation, falsehood, injustice, things being out of sync. Not evil exactly, just wrong. Every time a lie was told, a bribe was taken, or a river flooded at the wrong time, Maat faltered and Isfet gained ground. This battle wasn't fought with swords, it was fought with choices. Now let's go back to that weighing of the heart. You're standing there, looking at the feather. Maat is watching, not with judgment, but with absolute clarity. There's no trick here, no divine courtroom drama. Your heart is weighed against the principle of truth. If you lived in accordance with Maat, spoke truth, kept balance, fed the hungry, honoured your parents, your heart floats like driftwood. If you hoarded, lied, or threw the universe off balance with selfishness, down it goes, into Amit's open jaws. Now for your fringe fact, Maat was sometimes considered the sister of the sun god Ra, and in certain hymns, she's even described as the force that steers his boat across the sky. Not physically, but conceptually. Without her, even the sun wouldn't know where to go. That's how deep her order runs, into the sun's own identity, into time itself. She also had temples, but in a very different way from other gods. You didn't sacrifice animals to Maat, you lived well for her, you told the truth. You gave correct weights at the market, you didn't cheat on your taxes, that was her worship. Ethics were devotion. The entire Egyptian legal system was considered a reflection of her divine principle. You didn't just obey the law, you aligned with Ma'at. Here's the scholarly debate of the evening. Was Ma'at truly a goddess, or more of a philosophical abstraction personified? Some Egyptologists argue she was a symbol-turned-deity, a metaphysical concept draped in human shape to help people better grasp the cosmic order. Others insist she was worshipped with the same reverence as Isis or Hathor, just with different rituals, less spectacle, more discipline. The truth, as always, is probably in between. The Egyptians had no issue blending symbol and soul. Ma'at didn't need loud hymns. Her temple was the courtroom, the harvest, the moment you held your tongue instead of lying. She was the voice that whispered, "That's not fair," even when no one else heard it. She's the balance between mercy and consequence, the reason why the universe didn't collapse after Osiris was murdered, or when the Eye of Ra disappeared. She is the line in the sand between chaos and peace, and she does not move. And that brings us back to you, again. You're lying still now, your own heart slowing in the quiet. Maybe you've had a chaotic day. Maybe you told a lie, even a small one. Maybe you ignored something you knew was wrong because it was easier to pretend not to see it. We all do it. The ancient Egyptians weren't saints either, but they believed that Ma'at wasn't about being perfect. She was about trying to be in balance, making it right the next time, telling the truth when it would be easier to stay quiet. They even wrote up the 42 negative confessions, a list of things you could say at judgment to prove your heart was light. They weren't grand. Religious declarations, they were simple, personal. I have not stolen. I have not murdered. I have not taken more than I gave. I have not closed my ears to those who cried. 42 statements whispered in the dark, hoping to pass the test. You close your eyes now and you feel it. The quiet weight of Ma'at. Not heavy, not threatening, just present. Like the feeling when the room finally goes quiet after a long day. Like the truth sitting in your chest. She is still, she is steady. She is the feather on the scale, and for tonight at least you rest balanced. By now you've travelled through divine courts, watched gods weigh hearts, and listened to a feather decide your eternal fate. But don't get too comfortable yet, because death in ancient Egypt. It wasn't a single moment. It was an adventure, a 12-stage obstacle course with cosmic gates, soul-sucking creatures, and one very, very long night. Welcome to the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, or as I like to call it, the original escape room of the afterlife. Let's be clear, the Duat is not hell. It's not a fiery punishment zone filled with screaming souls and ironic torture devices. It's a journey, a mysterious shifting landscape between death and rebirth, part mythic map, part cosmic test. And unlike other afterlife models, you don't just drop dead and pop up in paradise. Oh no, you have to earn it. So what is the Duat exactly? Imagine an endless river winding through shadowy valleys, caves, and twisted realms, each one more surreal than the last. There are flaming lakes, fields of knives, floating doors that open only if you know the right magic words. The sky changes colours, the stars flicker in strange patterns, and all around you, spirits, guardians, demons, gods, and occasional fire-breathing snakes with extra eyeballs. You know, standard road trip vibes. Most of this journey happens at night, which is exactly when Ra, the sun god, travels through the Duat on his nightly voyage. Remember, every time the sun sets, Ra isn't just clocking out for the day. He's diving into this exact underworld, fighting monsters and darkness to be reborn at dawn. And every dead soul who hopes to be reborn, they have to follow that same path. This isn't some one-size-fits-all tunnel of light. The Duat is different for every soul. The terrain bends depending on your life, your karma, your spiritual prep. If you died unprepared, without the proper rituals, spells, or scrolls, you could get stuck, or worse, eaten by one of the delightful underworld guardians whose job it is to test, scare, or dismember you. Let's meet a few of these friendly folks, shall we? There's Sekhmet, the scorpion goddess who protects the souls of the dead from venomous stings. There's Amit, the soul-devouring hybrid croc-lion hippo who only shows up if your heart fails the Ma'at test, but still intimidating. There are gatekeepers like He Who Lives on Snakes and Flame-Eyed, Bone Crusher. You know, your typical travel companions. Many of them carry names that are less like job titles and more like heavy metal album covers, and this is where it gets wild. Every hour of the night is its own region of the Duat, and each one has a unique trial. You might have to sail a boat through a river of fire, or give passwords to a gatekeeper with a falcon for a face, or recognise the true names of shadow monsters who feed on the unworthy. This isn't guesswork, you need prep. Which brings us to your historical fact. The Egyptians were so detailed in their underworld navigation system, they developed entire books for it. The Book of the Dead, the Book of Gates, the Book of Caverns. These weren't novels, they were manuals with specific instructions, spells and maps to help the soul survive the Duat. Think of them as cosmic cheat codes. And here's your fringe fact. In some versions, if you didn't have the spells memorised, you could write them on the inside of your tomb, on your coffin, or even on little scrolls buried with your body. If you were wealthy, you got an elaborate papyrus scroll. If not, well, hopefully you were just a really good memoriser, because nothing says awkward like arriving at the gate of the fifth flame-eyed guardian and forgetting the password halfway through. And there were passwords, specific ones. Lines like, "I have not eaten excrement, I have not spoken lies. I know the name of the god who guards this gate." That last part, crucial. The ancient Egyptians believed that knowing the true name of a thing gave you power over it. So navigating the Duat wasn't about muscle, it was about knowledge, about being able to say, "I know who you are, I know myself, I belong here." Let's pause for a second to absorb that. To survive the underworld, you didn't have to be strong or fast or clever. You had to be honest. You had to have lived a life in balance, then prepared for the journey with humility and care. You had to learn the spells, not because the gods were being dramatic, but because every piece of that preparation was a reflection of how seriously you took the afterlife, how seriously you took your soul. There's a beautiful symmetry to it. You pass through 12 hours of night like the sun does, and if you succeed, you're reborn with the dawn, not just metaphorically, actually reborn into the field of reeds, their version of heaven. Imagine the best version of your life turned up to 10. Clear waters, bright skies, food that never spoils, fields that always yield crops, reunions with loved ones. You can fish, you can write, you can finally nap in peace. It's rest, it's joy, it's the dream you didn't know you were dreaming, but only if you make it. Now for the scholarly debate of the evening. Was the Duat a real place to the Egyptians, or was it entirely symbolic? Some argue that the vivid imagery, fire lakes, guardians, floating boats, points to a literal belief in a spiritual geography. Others believe it was a moral allegory, designed to guide the living into better behaviour. The answer is probably both. For the Egyptians, the line between literal and symbolic didn't matter. What mattered was the preparation. They didn't fear death. They feared being unready. And that's something worth carrying into your own quiet moments. Not fear, but respect. Respect for the unknown, for the darkness. For the long road that waits behind the curtain of this life. So you lie still now, in the hush of your room, and you imagine the bark of Ra sailing by overhead. Beneath it, the Duat stretches deep and strange, filled with gods and monsters and spells you hope you remember. But you're not alone. Anubis is near, Maat is watching. And if you've lived in truth, if you've spoken the right names and left the world a little lighter than you found it, then yes, the gates will open. And the next chapter will begin, so you've made it into the Duat. Congratulations, or condolences, depending on how prepared you were. The good news is, you've still got a soul. The bad news is, it's about to get logistically complicated. Tonight, you'll need a roadmap, a pocket full of spells, and nerves of linen-wrapped steel because you're diving into the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a deluxe survival guide, the Book of the Dead. Now first off, the name is a total mistranslation. Book of the Dead sounds like something you'd find on a teenager's bookshelf next to a cracked Ouija board and a dusty skull-shaped candle. But the Egyptians called it Ru Nu Pertem Ru, the Book of Coming Forth by Day. That hits different, doesn't it? Less zombie apocalypse, more spiritual rebirth through magical self-actualization. This wasn't a single standardized book. It was a customizable compilation of spells, over 190 of them in some collections, written on scrolls, tomb walls, coffins, and even shrouds. Some people had deluxe versions with full-colour illustrations and gold ink. Others got the economy pack, a few choice lines on a papyrus scrap, just enough to bluff your way past one or two underworld gatekeepers. But everyone wanted something. because without it, you were wandering blind through a soul-scouring obstacle course with no map, no compass, and no helpline. These spells weren't just recitations, they were tools. Each one had a specific function. Want to transform into a bird so you can fly over a lake of fire? There's a spell for that. Need to convince a crocodile-faced guardian that you're not lying, even though you definitely borrowed your neighbour's goat without asking last year? Spell for that too. The book was equal parts spiritual survival kit and personal manifesto. Let's open to spell 125. It's the most famous one. The Negative Confession. You stand before the 42 assessors of Maat, and instead of listing your accomplishments, you recite everything you didn't do. I have not committed murder. I have not cheated in the marketplace. I have not cursed the gods. I have not made anyone cry unfairly. Each statement is like peeling off a layer of who you were. Not your titles, not your wealth, just your choices. It's oddly intimate. And what's wild is that these spells are personalised. Some copies of the Book of the Dead literally say, "This spell is to be spoken by insert name here," as if you were writing your own funeral playlist. Except instead of slow piano ballads, it's a list of ethical receipts for eternal judgment. Your historical fact tonight. These texts weren't written by a single priesthood or prophetic figure. They evolved over 1,500 years, from the Old Kingdom's pyramid text, to the Middle Kingdom's coffin text, to the New Kingdom's Book of the Dead. What began as sacred secrets for royalty slowly became available to nobles, scribes, and eventually anyone who could afford the scroll. Death, like everything else, became democratized. And here's your fringe fact. One copy of the Book of the Dead, known as the Papyrus of Ani, is nearly 80 feet long and packed with gorgeous illustrations. It shows Ani, a scribe, naturally, passing every underworld test with flying colours. We have no idea if he was actually that virtuous in life, but hey, when you're writing your own afterlife cheat sheet, it never hurts to edit for the judges. A little narrative flair never hurt anyone, except maybe Amit, if you lie too well. But what did the Egyptians really believe these spells did? It wasn't about tricking the gods. The spells weren't lies, they were declarations, aspirations. You weren't just saying I didn't steal, you were aligning yourself with a cosmic ideal. By saying it, you became it. The Duat didn't just test who you were, it tested who you claimed to be. And the gods, they listened. The Book of the Dead included spells to help you breathe in the next world, eat in the next world, avoid decapitation, escape snares, repel snakes, and reassemble yourself if your body got split into pieces. You could even turn into different animals, a falcon, a lotus, a heron, whatever form best served your journey. It was transformation magic at its finest, but not every soul made it. Some got lost, some were devoured, some forgot the names of the guardians or failed to recognise their own reflections. That's the unsettling part. The Duat wasn't just a place, it was you. Your doubts, your regrets, your unfinished business. If you didn't know yourself, really know, you might just vanish into it. Which leads us to our scholarly debate. Did Egyptians believe these texts had literal magical power, or were they symbolic instructions for spiritual growth? Many Egyptologists fall somewhere in the middle. The line between magic and religion didn't exist in ancient Egyptian thought. Writing itself was sacred. Words had power. To speak was to do. That's why these spells mattered. They weren't just reminders, they were weapons. There's something beautiful about it, though. The idea that when you die, your voice doesn't go silent. It becomes your defense, your guide, your identity. You're not just a soul drifting into oblivion. You're a speaker, a traveller, a witness to your own life. And in those quiet spaces between gates and rivers of flame, your words are what keep you together. So now, imagine this. You're standing before a black stone gate. Behind it, the next phase of your afterlife. In your hand, the scroll of your Book of the Dead, worn, creased, but yours. You know the name of the guardian. You whisper the spell. The gate doesn't swing open with a bang. It melts into light. You walk forward. The ink on your scroll glows softly. You're still yourself, still becoming. Back in the world of the living, you lie in bed, still breathing. But maybe, just maybe, part of you is already practicing. Speaking truths, memorizing names, preparing your own book, not for fear, but for love, for continuity, for the promise that death is not an end, just another doorway with very specific entry instructions. Sleep well, traveller, and remember your lines. By now, you've memorised the passwords, whispered the spells, and possibly tricked a flame-eyed demon or two, which, honestly, puts you ahead of most people's afterlife goals. But here's the twist. Not every Egyptian city agreed on how the universe was created, or who made what, or in what order. If you thought Egyptian mythology was one smooth, continuous scroll, think again. Tonight we're diving into the other creation stories, the theological remixes from Hermopolis and Memphis, where the gods you thought you knew show up in wildly different forms, and the cosmos gets rebooted more times than your Wi-Fi router. Let's start with Hermopolis, the city of the moon, the ibis, and nerdy cosmic speculation. This is Thoth's city, and in Hermopolis they had their own idea of how it all began, not with Ra or Atum or a sneeze of divine loneliness, but with 8 gods. Yes, 8. A divine octet called the Ogdoad. Now, before your eyes glaze over, let's break this down. The Ogdoad was 4 pairs of male and female deities, each representing a primordial concept. Darkness, infinity, invisibility, and hiddenness. The males had frog heads, the females had snake heads, because nothing says primordial soup like amphibians and reptiles. Their names? Nun and Naunet, Her and Hauhet, Kek and Kauket, Amun and Amunet. If those sound like the audio skipped halfway through, that's kind of the point. These beings were barely formed, more concept than character. They didn't build the world, they were the raw materials it emerged from. And how did it emerge? According to Hermopolis one day, boom! A cosmic egg floated up from the waters of chaos. Or, in some versions, a lotus flower. Either way, it cracks open, and out steps the first god of the ordered world. Some say it's Ra, others say it's Thoth. Some just quietly nod and say, yeah, that tracks, as if a frog-headed chaos couple laying an egg containing the sun is completely normal. This egg story might sound weird, but it's actually rich with symbolism. An egg holds life before it's visible. It's a self-contained world. And in this version, the universe doesn't explode into being. It hatches, quietly and fully formed, glowing with light. The sun doesn't burn its way into the sky, it unfolds. Your historical fact tonight: temples in Hermopolis were full of references to the Ogdoad. They even had cryptic inscriptions and symbolic rituals tied to the number 8. This wasn't just some fringe fan theory, it was a fully institutionalized theology, running parallel to the more well-known Heliopolitan version with Atum and Ra. In Egypt, theology was local. Your gods were your team, your city, your myth version. And now, to really twist your mind, let's visit Memphis, the ancient capital of kings, laws, and stone-carving ambition. Here, the creation myth centers around Ptah, a god who doesn't spit out children or hatch from frog chaos. He just speaks. That's it. He imagines the world in his heart, then brings it into being with his tongue. Let that sink in. No battles, no magical eggs. Just divine thought, followed by divine word. Ptah says, "Let there be light," and there is. Sound familiar? Yeah. Scholars have noted for years that this Memphite theology parallels certain aspects of later monotheistic traditions, where the act of speaking is sacred and creative. But the Egyptians were already on it thousands of years earlier. In Memphis, speech is magic. The heart is the source of will, and the tongue is the tool of manifestation. Ptah doesn't need helpers. He doesn't rage or bleed or stumble through emotional fatherhood like Atum. He just imagines the universe, speaks it into shape, and moves on. And this isn't some abstract idea. The Memphite creation story was literally inscribed on a slab known as the Shabaka stone, named after Pharaoh Shabaka, who had it copied from a worm-eaten papyrus before it was lost forever. The story describes how Ptah created the gods, the cities, the rituals, all of it, through the power of divine word. Fringe fact time. In this theology, Ptah becomes the hidden mover behind all the other gods. Ra may shine, Thoth may calculate, but Ptah, he's the architect, the mind behind the myth. You don't see him, but you're living inside his thought. So here's the kicker. All 3 creation myths were accepted. Egyptians didn't cancel one theology just because another came along. They let them exist in tandem, layering meaning on meaning. If you lived in Hermopolis, you believed in the Ogdoad. In Memphis, Ptah was the supreme creative force. In Heliopolis, it all started with Atum and a lonely sneeze. Nobody yelled plot hole. They just nodded wisely and said, different aspects of the same great mystery. Now for the scholarly debate. Was this theological flexibility a sign of tolerance or just good politics? Some argue the myths were crafted to unify cities and priesthoods, ensuring everyone felt spiritually seen. Others say it reflects a deeper truth in Egyptian belief, that reality isn't either or, it's yes, and also this. The truth is layered, plural. Myth wasn't supposed to make sense, it was supposed to make meaning, and that, honestly, is kind of comforting. Because life isn't clean or singular either. Sometimes you're the egg, sometimes you're the word, sometimes you're a frog-headed chaos god paddling in the depths, waiting for something to hatch. So you lie back now, tucked under your own version of the sky, and you let it all swirl together. Ra's light, Thoth's logic, Ptah's speech, the lotus rising from the water like a quiet hope. Maybe you've never said your own name with divine intent. Maybe you've never imagined a world and spoken it into being. But maybe, someday, you will. And maybe that's how all new things begin. So far, you've learned that the Egyptian cosmos isn't stitched together with logic. It's woven with poetry, symbols, spells, and just enough chaos to keep things interesting. Gods turn into birds, souls become stars, and even the sun has to battle a giant worm every night just to rise again. But underneath all of that, beneath the spells, the mummies, the carefully weighed hearts, there's something deeper holding it all together. Not just belief, not just ritual, something more primal, more versatile. More practical. Tonight we enter the endlessly bendable realm of Heka, Egyptian magic, and yes, it's real. Let's be clear, when the Egyptians said magic, they weren't talking about card tricks or pulling hippos out of hats. Heka wasn't stage performance or fantasy. It was a fundamental force of the universe, just like gravity, light, or time. In fact, the ancient Egyptians didn't even separate magic from science, religion, or medicine. If something worked, if it healed a wound, calmed a spirit, summoned rain, or convinced a god to chill out, that was Heka at work. And here's the thing. Heka was also a god. Yeah. Not just a force, but an actual divine being. And the force he represented, a kind of metaphysical recursion. Heka is both the magic and the magician. He's depicted as a man carrying two entwined serpents, often shown alongside other deities during healing rituals or acts of creation. In fact, the gods themselves were said to exist because of Heka. Even Ra needed Heka to ride his boat through the underworld. That's right, the sun god needed magic to do his job. It's almost funny when you think about it. Ra, king of everything, still relying on this quiet, unseen force whispering behind the curtain. And that's the point. Heka was the current running under everything. It wasn't flashy, it just was. Let's get into the practice. Imagine you're an average person in ancient Egypt. Not a priest, not a pharaoh. Just someone trying to make it through life without being eaten by a crocodile or cursed by your cousin's ex-wife. You'd have access to spells, simple ones. Maybe your mother gave you a small amulet for protection. Maybe you know a few charms to ease childbirth, stop nightmares, ward off snake bites, or make your beer foam properly. Yes, that was a thing. Magic wasn't elite. It was every day. Farmers blessed their fields. Merchants wore protective glyphs. Fishermen whispered invocations into the water. Magic wasn't extra. It was how you got through life without constantly dying. Here's your historical fact. Entire papyri were devoted to these spells. The most famous is the Papyrus Ibis, a massive medical text that includes treatments for everything from snake bites to asthma, some using herbs, others using incantations, and many using both. Because again, to the Egyptians there was no distinction. Magic and medicine were the same discipline. A healer was also a magician. If your doctor wasn't trained in Heka, you were basically rolling the dice on your lungs. There were specialists, of course, professional magicians, priest-doctors, scribes who could write spells in perfect hieratic script, then activate them with carefully controlled rituals. Some worked for temples, others were freelance, hired to bless homes, craft charms, or deal with ghosts. And yes, the Egyptians absolutely believed in ghosts, angry ones. especially if you didn't bury your aunt properly or borrowed her jewellery and never returned it. Ghost management was part of the job. Now, for your fringe fact, Egyptians believed written words were alive. That's why spells had to be written, not just spoken. Ink itself was magical, black for permanence, red for danger or emphasis. Some texts had to be buried with the dead. Others were folded into amulets, worn as necklaces, or even swallowed, not recommended even then. It's why scribes were considered semi-divine. They weren't just copying stuff, they were shaping reality. Every curve of every glyph was a spell being born. And this leads us to one of the most intense ideas in all of Egyptian thought. You could use Heka to control the gods. That's not a typo. Now, before you imagine some angry farmer summoning Ra with a strongly worded papyrus, it's a little more nuanced than that. The idea was this. If you knew the true name of a god, the name behind the name, you could compel them to listen. Maybe not control them like puppets, but influence them. Ask for things they normally wouldn't give, unlock aspects of them that weren't accessible to the average mortal. Remember when Isis wanted to heal her son Horus and needed Ra's power? She tricked him into revealing his secret name by creating a magical snake bite he couldn't heal himself. When he was desperate enough, he whispered his true name to her, and that knowledge gave her immense power. That was Heka at its highest level, not just spell work, not just ritual, but the weaving of divine language into real-world consequence. Which brings us to the scholarly debate. Was Heka a democratic power, or something only the elite truly understood? Some argue that while everyday people used charms and amulets, the real magic, the dangerous cosmic kind, was reserved for priests, kings, and scribes. Others believe the boundary wasn't so clear. A wise woman in a village might know a protection spell as old as any temples. Magic wasn't always flashy. Sometimes it was just effective, and that might be the point. Heka wasn't about belief. It was about function. You didn't have to believe a spell would work. You just had to do it properly. Magic was a verb. It either worked or it didn't, and when it did, it stitched the world back together. So let's bring it back to you. You're lying still now. Maybe it's late. Maybe your body is heavy and your mind is light. You don't need incantations or glyphs to feel that subtle hum underneath everything. The invisible thread of will and word and wonder. Maybe you've whispered something under your breath before doing something hard. Maybe you've kept a little trinket in your pocket and felt stronger because of it. Maybe, without knowing it, you've used Heka. You don't need a priest. You don't need a frog-headed chaos god. You don't even need a papyrus scroll. You just need the knowledge that intention matters, that words carry weight, that you, yes, you, can shape your own path, one quiet spell at a time. So sleep now, little magician. There's power in your breath and magic in your name. Now that you're sufficiently comfortable with the idea that magic is real, your words have power, and frogs might be gods in disguise, it's time to talk about immortality. Not the shiny, Hollywood kind. Not glittering vampires or billionaire-uploaded consciousness floating through the cloud. No, we're talking Egyptian immortality. A dusty, complicated, multi-layered affair with spells, organs in jars, and a whole metaphysical bureaucracy stacked against you. Tonight, you learn how to live forever, the Egyptian way. Let's start with the most iconic image of ancient Egypt, the mummy. Bandaged, gold-masked, arms crossed, surrounded by glowing treasure and possibly cursed. But behind that stereotype is a whole spiritual operating system. Mummification wasn't about preserving your body for the museum crowd. It was about preserving your identity so your soul didn't get confused. And Egyptian souls were very picky. See, according to Egyptian thought, you weren't just one solid thing. You were made of several parts, and if they didn't stay aligned, your afterlife experience could get weird. So let's unpack you. You had your ka, your life force, like a spiritual battery. It needed food, offerings, rituals. Think of it as the part of you that still wants snacks after death. The K stays near the tomb and must be nourished with actual bread and beer, or symbolic versions, which is why tombs are covered in offering formulas. Even a statue or inscription could feed the ka. If you didn't feed it, it withered. You ghosted, literally. Then there's your bar, the part of your soul that was mobile, free, curious. The bear is often depicted as a human-headed bird that flaps between worlds, It visits family, checks in on your body, hangs around temples, maybe people watches for fun, but it has to return to your body every night, which is why your body better be in good shape, or your bear might get confused, lost, or just stop coming home. There's also the Ak, the transfigured spirit. That's your immortal self, the one that shines among the stars, joins the gods, and gets VIP access to the field of reeds. The Ak is created when the Bay and the Ka reunite successfully in the afterlife. It's like the final evolution of your being. But if something went wrong, if you were buried incorrectly, your name was erased, or your body decayed beyond recognition. You couldn't become an Archai, you'd stay fragmented, unfinished. So yeah, no pressure, and this is where mummification comes in. The entire point of the ritual was to anchor your identity, to make sure your bear and Kay could find each other, recognise you, and carry on. That's why the body had to be preserved. That's why the face was often covered with a golden mask. It wasn't vanity, it was an ID card for the soul. Your historical fact tonight: the mummification process could take up to 70 days. It wasn't a quick wrap job. Organs were removed, dried, and placed in canopic jars, each one guarded by one of the 4 sons of Horus. The stomach went to Duamutief, the jackal-headed guardian, the lungs to Hapi, with a baboon face, the liver to Imseti, human-headed and Chill, and the intestines. Those were guarded by Kabes Nuef, the falcon-headed one. Each jar had a specific spell, a specific deity, and a specific orientation in the tomb. Lose one? Risk eternal indigestion. And the heart. That was usually left inside the body, unless someone got nervous and removed it, in which case you needed a heart scarab, an amulet to replace it. That scarab would be engraved with spell 30b from the Book of the Dead, which basically begged your heart not to snitch during judgment. Ancient spiritual bribery at its finest. Now for your fringe fact, not everyone was mummified the same way. The wealthy got deluxe treatment, linen, oils, gold, resin, the whole divine spa package. But even middle-class Egyptians scraped together enough for basic preservation. They believed deeply in continuity. Being forgotten was the real death. That's why names were carved everywhere, walls, statues, stele. Your name was your anchor. As long as someone remembered it, you still existed. This leads us to the opening of the mouth ceremony, one of the most critical moments in the mummification process. After the body was prepared and placed in its tomb, a priest, often wearing a jackal mask in honour of Anubis, would perform a ritual to open the deceased senses in the afterlife. They'd touch the mouth, eyes, and ears with ritual tools, reciting spells to ensure the person could speak, see, hear, and eat again. You weren't just preserving a corpse, you were reactivating a soul. Which brings us to the big question. Did this work? Did the Egyptians believe immortality was a guarantee or a goal? Here's the scholarly debate. Some Egyptologists argue that Egyptians genuinely believed in the survival of the soul if the rituals were done right. Others see it more as an expression of hope, a psychological framework for dealing with grief and loss. But even the skeptics admit this wasn't shallow superstition. It was a profound system designed to make death manageable, understandable, bearable. And let's not pretend that sounds so strange. Don't we still cling to names, photos, ashes in urns, flowers on graves, social media pages kept alive long after someone's gone? Don't we still write obituaries like spells, summoning memories to preserve identity? The ancient Egyptians were just better at it. So now, as you lie still and quiet, imagine your own immortal parts fluttering softly like birds in the dark. Your car resting near your feet, still hungry. Your bear perched near the ceiling, circling slowly, waiting for morning. Your name glowing somewhere, still spoken, still real. And somewhere, perhaps far below the earth or floating in a field of stars, your ark begins to take shape. Not as a ghost, but as something complete. Not just dead, transformed. You've got your bay, you've got your car. Your name has been etched into stone, your organs are chilling comfortably in jars guarded by falcon-headed demigods, and your mummy is looking fly in its gold-trimmed wrappings. You've passed judgment, dodged soul-eating beasts, and earned your place in the next world. So what now? Tonight, you finally reach your reward. The Egyptian version of paradise, the place where eternal peace meets endless harvests. Welcome to the field of reeds, also known as Aru. Now, Before you go imagining fluffy clouds and heart-plucking angels, take a deep breath. This is not heaven with a sunroof. It's Egypt, but perfected. A mirror of the world you knew, but without disease, injustice, taxes, or awkward family gatherings. A kind of divine rural utopia where the Nile flows forever, crops grow without effort, and nobody's ever out of beer. In fact, one of the key rewards of the afterlife is farming. Yes, really. You harvest grain, you tend fields, you live off the land, but instead of back-breaking labour, it's all easy, satisfying. The gods didn't imagine eternal joy as escaping work. They imagined perfect work. Work with no hunger, no heat stroke, no failed irrigation. You do what you were born to do, forever, in peace. And it's not just fields and fruit trees. The field of reeds is packed with gardens, clean water, perfect weather, and everyone you loved, assuming they passed judgment too. Families reunited, pets restored. Your grandmother might be waiting with your favourite bread and honey beer. Your childhood cat, maybe mummified long ago, curls up beside your chair again. But don't get too lazy. Even in paradise, there's paperwork. See, Egyptians believed that while the field of reeds was your final home, it didn't mean you were entirely off duty. You had responsibilities, duties. Some souls even got pulled back into the world occasionally, to help the living in dreams or act as spiritual guides. And others were summoned for rituals. Remember those Shabti figures? Little statues buried with you? They were meant to come to life and do your chores for you in the afterlife, like celestial interns. So yes, even your magical servants needed to be prepped in advance. Here's your historical fact for tonight. The field of reeds appears in several funerary texts, including the Book of the Dead, where it's described as a real, tangible place with gates, canals, and divine watchmen. In many versions, the deceased had to pass through 15 gates, each with its own guardian. But once you were in for good. Unless, of course, someone messed with your tomb, your name, or your body. In that case, well, it got complicated. That's why tomb protection was such a big deal. It wasn't just about keeping grave robbers out, it was about keeping the soul stable. The Egyptians genuinely feared second death, being forgotten, erased, or desecrated. So much so that they carved spells into their coffins threatening anyone who dared touch them. These weren't gentle curses either. Some inscriptions promise blindness, madness, or divine vengeance in the form of a hippo-headed deity hurling fireballs. But assuming no one messed with your burial and your name stayed intact, you'd live in Aru forever. Not just eternally alive, but eternally you. That's the big difference between Egyptian paradise and many others. You didn't dissolve into some collective light. You didn't float around as a formless spirit. You stayed you, with all your memories, your relationships, your identity, your voice. That's part of what made death so bearable to the Egyptians. It wasn't an erasure, it was a continuation. The afterlife wasn't a reset, it was a reward. Now here's your fringe fact. Some images of the field of reeds include boats, lots of them. Everyone has their own little skiff to sail along the canals. You could visit other spirits, drop in on relatives, attend festivals. Even in paradise you had social plans. Some tombs even included maps of the field of reeds, drawn to guide the soul through the afterlife like a divine GPS. And yes, there were festivals. Imagine a divine version of Nile-side celebrations, but with no hangovers and infinite dancing. Souls could offer prayers to gods, receive blessings, even meet deities in person. And since time didn't really exist in the field of reeds, these moments weren't fleeting. You could stay in a perfect sunset forever. You could stretch a joyful meal with loved ones into eternity. No clock, no calendar, just bliss. But, as always, there's a twist. The Egyptians were deeply concerned with balance. Even in paradise, you weren't meant to stagnate. The field of reeds was not a mindless state of bliss. It was a place of harmony. That meant doing your part, tending your field, feeding your ka, staying grateful. Because if you let that slip, if your memory faded or your descendants stopped making offerings or your tomb collapsed into dust, the afterlife could unravel. This leads to the scholarly debate. Did Egyptians believe the afterlife was eternal or conditionally maintained? Some texts suggest that as long as you were remembered and your body preserved, your soul could continue indefinitely. Others hint at a kind of cosmic recycling. where, after a very long period, even the blessed dead might rejoin the universe, contributing their energy back into the cosmic flow. Not punishment, just return. But whatever the case, the goal remained the same. Achieve Mayat, preserve your identity, and enter the field of reeds whole. And now, your eyes are heavy. The room is dark. Maybe a fan hums in the background like the hush of wind over a field. Maybe you can almost hear the rustling of papyrus reeds, smell fresh-cut grain, the scent of figs, warm bread on the breeze. You imagine yourself walking barefoot along a narrow canal, boat tied up nearby. The water is still. The sky above never fades. Your hands trail through tall grass. In the distance, someone calls your name, a voice you haven't heard in years. But here, it's clear, alive, eternal. And you remember, this was always the promise. Not gold, not thrones, just peace, just wholeness, a field, a breeze, a life without end. You've arrived, finally, in that quiet eternity of the field of reeds, your feet brushing golden grain, your car nourished, your bar circling contentedly. But as peaceful as it seems, the Egyptians weren't naive. They knew that eternity without purpose or memory could become a trap. That's where the power of ritual and remembrance comes in. Because in Egypt, the living and the dead were linked in an ongoing conversation, a continuous thread that kept both realms aligned. Funerary rites, temple offerings, and prayers weren't just traditions, they were the maintenance plan for your immortal self. Consider the daily offerings left at tombs. Bread, beer, incense, and small figurines of food weren't gifts in the ordinary sense. They were nourishment for the car, a symbolic reminder that your life force was still appreciated, still connected to the mortal world. Priest recited hymns, chanting the names of the deceased, effectively feeding their spiritual identity. Even in the field of reeds, your sustenance depended on attention from those still alive. The cycle of life and death was intertwined, a two-way street with invisible traffic signals. Forget the living, and your immortality risked fraying at the edges. Historical fact time. Egyptians believed that if the living neglected these rituals, the soul's car could weaken, wander, or even vanish. Tombs were built with storage rooms full of symbolic items, inscribed with spells and sometimes stocked with real food. Offerings were made daily, weekly, or annually to ensure the deceased continued their journey smoothly. This is why tomb inscriptions often repeat, "May my car be satisfied." Satisfaction wasn't metaphorical, it was survival. Fringe fact. Some Egyptians went as far as hiring professional mourning priests, whose sole job was to wail dramatically at funerals, sing dirges, and perform ritualized lamentations to ensure the deceased's car remained powerful. In some extreme cases, these performances could last for days, with teams rotating in shifts. Imagine that. The concept of job security applied even after death. But the importance of remembrance didn't stop at food or ceremony. Memory was magical. Inscriptions of your name on tomb walls were considered alive. To have your name erased was to threaten the very existence of your soul. This is why tomb robbers weren't just thieves, they were existential threats. Tomb desecration could risk not just wealth, but the continuation of your identity in the afterlife. The Egyptians didn't take this lightly. Magic and memory were the twin pillars supporting eternity. And the cycle didn't stop with one generation. Children, grandchildren, and even distant relatives were expected to maintain rituals. Your immortality depended on the care of descendants, the continuity of tradition. Ancestors were active participants in the world of the living, influencing events, bestowing blessings and sometimes exacting quiet vengeance when balance was threatened. To be forgotten was the ultimate peril. Your story, your identity, and even your access to the field of the reeds were conditional on ongoing acknowledgement. Here's the scholarly debate. Some Egyptologists argue that this system represents a sophisticated cultural method to enforce morality, social cohesion, and continuity of familial and political lines. Others emphasize its theological dimension, noting that immortality and remembrance were inseparable from Mayat. Without order in the living world, the afterlife could collapse. Perhaps it's both, a spiritual principle and a practical social mechanism wrapped into one seamless mythos. Now imagine the field of reeds itself, eternal yet constantly sustained by the living. You're walking along a canal that mirrors the Nile, feeling cool water slip between your toes. In the distance, golden crops sway gently, as if breathing with your presence. Birds call softly, not threatening, only harmonizing with the rhythm of your immortal day. Your bear flutters overhead, checking in like a guardian angel. You see other souls tending their fields, fishing or resting, each engaged in gentle, meaningful activity. No rush, no end, just continuity. And then there's the comfort of knowing that while you're safe here, the living world still matters. Prayers offered in distant temples or whispered beside your tomb ripple across reality, strengthening your presence. Ancestors maintain an invisible conversation with you. Gods may wander through, blessing the moment or nudging things toward balance. It's a living eternity, infinitely intertwined, a perpetual loop of attention, devotion, and existence. Finally, you settle down beneath a shade tree by the canal, feeling the subtle warmth of the sun overhead, which never burns, only nourishes. Your car sips the symbolic offerings, your bear circles in approval, and your Ak, your eternal self, is beginning to shine softly among the reeds. You are whole, remembered, active, and safe. Not stagnant, not asleep, but alive in the fullest, most enduring way the Egyptians envisioned. And somewhere in the far distance the Nile sparkles eternally, a reminder that the world continues, ever flowing, ever balanced, even in paradise, even with the field of reeds stretched endlessly before you. Ancient Egyptian mythology reminds us that the cosmos isn't static. It's alive, dynamic, and constantly negotiating balance. And that brings us to one of the most subtle, yet crucial principles of their worldview: Ma'at versus Isfet. Order versus chaos. You've met Ma'at before, the feathered goddess of truth and cosmic stability. Isfet is her shadow, her counterweight, the reason the Egyptians never took eternity for granted. In the field of reeds, order reigns, but the threat of disruption is always present, and the maintenance of balance requires vigilance even in bliss. Isfet isn't a deity in the traditional sense. She doesn't sit on a throne or demand sacrifices. She's a principle, a pervasive force, an underlying tension. Think of her as the natural entropy of the universe. Things decay, rivers flood unpredictably, tempers flare, and crocodiles don't always follow the rules. Chaos is inherent, and the Egyptians understood that. The story of Horus and Set, the nightly journey of Ra through the Duat, and even the rampage of Sekhmet all embody this duality. The cosmos is constantly negotiating between order and disorder, creation and destruction, life and death. Historical fact: in Egyptian society, maintaining Ma'at wasn't just a spiritual exercise, it was a political and social obligation. Pharaohs were considered the earthly guarantors of Ma'at. Their laws, construction projects, agricultural management, and religious observances were all interpreted as acts to sustain cosmic balance. If a pharaoh failed, floods, famines, or plagues were often seen as manifestations of Isfet gaining ground. The stability of the universe was literally thought to depend on the proper functioning of human institutions, rituals, and ethics. Fringe fact: some texts personify Isfet in ways that are almost delightfully terrifying. She's sometimes described as a serpent with fiery breath, or a chaos dragon coiled in the darkness of the primordial waters, invisible but always present. Certain magical texts included spells specifically to bind Isfet in the underworld, or to repel her influence in the mortal realm. You could carry this chaos like a backpack, manageable if you respected the rules, lethal if you ignored them. And the connection between Ma'at and Isfet wasn't just about cosmic drama. It was profoundly personal. Every individual had a role in sustaining balance. Speaking truth, feeding the car, honouring the gods, treating others fairly, all were acts that pushed back against chaos. Every choice, however small, contributed to the ongoing dance between order and disorder. Even in paradise, the cycle didn't end. The afterlife wasn't a passive reward. It was an active engagement, a continuation of the cosmic contract. This leads to scholarly debate. Were the Egyptians describing a moral framework, or was this more metaphysical? Some scholars argue that the duality of Ma'at and Isfet served as an ethical guide for living, while others claim it was an observable principle of natural and social phenomena personified as deities. The truth, as always, probably combines both. ethical conduct, ritual practice, and cosmic law interwoven, inseparable from the very fabric of life and death. Now picture the field of reeds again. You're walking through swaying fields of golden grain. Every canal, every boat, every floating lotus is in perfect alignment. You can hear distant laughter, the rustle of tall grasses, the whisper of a gentle breeze. Yet somewhere deep in the horizon there is a reminder. Entropy exists. Shadows lengthen just slightly, the reed stalks shift with an unpredictable rhythm, and the river's current hums softly, a pulse of life and chaos intertwined. Even here, perfection requires mindfulness, attentiveness, and respect. And you realize the brilliance of it. Egyptian paradise isn't a static reward. It's a living system, one in which your presence, your actions, and your remembrance are integral to sustaining the balance. You're both participant and observer. Eternal bliss exists not in isolation, but in harmony with forces seen and unseen, in a constant negotiation with the persistent possibility of disorder. So as the soft wind touches your face, the reeds sway like a gentle applause, and your eternal self drifts through a world that is safe yet alive. You feel the quiet hum of the cosmos beneath your feet. Ma'at is balanced, but not permanent. Isfet lingers at the edges as she must. And you, along with all souls, are part of the ongoing conversation, the eternal act of keeping the universe aligned, alive, and radiant. Now that you've wandered through eternity, observe the delicate balance between Ma'at and Isfet, and strolled through the golden canals of the field of reeds, it's time to pull the lens back and see the full scope of Egyptian mythology. This is not just a series of fantastical stories about gods, monsters, and eternal fields. It's a meticulously constructed framework for understanding life, death, and the cosmos. Every tale, every ritual, every feathered scale, and every carefully mummified body was part of a grand vision. A universe where order could be maintained, chaos contained, and humans and gods alike played roles in an eternal narrative. Consider the pantheon itself. It's not a static family tree. It's a web of relationships, identities, and functions. Ra's brilliance illuminates the world but relies on Heka for safe passage through the Duat. Osiris dies, is resurrected, and rules the underworld, while Horus challenges Set and restores balance to the mortal realm. Isis acts as the connective tissue, magical, devoted, cunning, binding the fates of gods and humans together. Sekhmet and Bastet remind us that power and mercy coexist, while Anubis ensures that every soul is guided and measured correctly. Ma'at represents principle, Isfet, the necessary counterweight. Every character, every action has meaning. Historical fact, temples, tombs, and texts weren't just for show. Egyptians believed the rituals, offerings, and inscriptions actively affected the gods, the cosmos, and the afterlife. The mythology was a working system, a dynamic blueprint for maintaining harmony across both seen and unseen realms. Life and death weren't separate, they were continuous. The gods were not distant figures, they were omnipresent, interacting with humans, influencing fate, and shaping reality itself. By enacting the myths in daily life and in funerary practices, the Egyptians literally co-created the stability of the universe. Fringe fact, the stories often include the absurd, grotesque, or bizarre, like Apophis swallowing the sun, Horus losing an eye, or Sekhmet rampaging drunk on blood-red beer. These weren't just dramatic flourishes, they highlighted the delicate and often chaotic nature of existence. By personifying chaos, failure, and imperfection, Egyptians acknowledged uncertainty while offering tools, spells, rituals, ethics, for maintaining order. It's like a cosmic what-if manual, complete with problem-solving instructions written across millennia. And here's the enduring lesson. Egyptian mythology doesn't simply entertain, it teaches resilience, foresight, and moral awareness. It reminds us that every action has consequences, that life and death are interconnected, and that balance is a continuous effort, not a static reward. Mortality, memory, and morality are all intertwined, and the myths give structure to the chaos, offering hope, instruction, and wisdom. Immortality is achieved not through luck or brute force, but through knowledge, preparation, and alignment with cosmic order. As you drift deeper into your own quiet space, imagine yourself walking through the fields once more. The golden grain bends gently in the eternal breeze. Canals shimmer with reflected sunlight. Your car rests nourished, your bar drifts freely, and your ark glows softly in the background. You are part of a living, breathing system, connected to gods, ancestors, and the cosmos. Your actions, your memory, your truth maintain a balance greater than any single life. And though the stories are thousands of years old, they resonate because they honour human experience, divine interaction, and the ongoing effort to live in harmony with the world and its hidden forces. So, take a deep breath. Feel the warmth of the sun that never burns. Hear the subtle rustle of reeds in the eternal breeze, and know this. Egyptian mythology is not just a bedtime story. It is a map for the cosmos, a guide for the soul, and a reminder that life, death, and balance are a continuous dance. You have walked the Nile, witnessed the gods, survived trials, and arrived in paradise. And tonight, in this quiet space between dreams and wakefulness, you are both student and participant in an endless, radiant story.